A magic dragon tried to summon a goddess with wondrous beauty and healing powers. However, instead of a goddess, Ojin appeared disoriented and confused. He assumed he was dead and began to reminisce about his past life. The difficult years in veterinary school, the frequent scoldings, finally getting his veterinarian's license, and then enduring 3 years of low-paying work while caring for abandoned pets. After endless struggles, our main character managed to open a small clinic, but it was just barely staying afloat. There were no customers, and even the light on his sign had gone out. One night, as Ojin lay in bed, reflecting on his miserable situation and mounting debt, he heard a strange sound. Before he could react, our boy suddenly found himself in a cave filled with treasure and a glowing summoning circle. Convinced he had gone to hell, he demanded to know why he had been brought there. The dragon explained that it had summoned him to treat its pet. Expecting a fearsome monster, our hero was stunned when the dragon opened its claw to reveal a tiny fruit bat, sleeping weakly, named Carl's. Observing the weak, dehydrated bat, Ojin immediately switched into professional mode, asking about its name, symptoms, and how long the dragon had been caring for it. Proudly, the dragon said it had owned Carl's for a week, since pet ownership had become popular among dragons. Recalling his contempt for those who adopt pets, on a whim, our protagonist asked if Carl's was eating and drinking properly. The dragon confidently replied that it fed it fresh animal blood, assuming the bat had a refined palate. Stunned, Ojin bowed his head in disbelief, realizing this was the type of owner he hated most, those who knew nothing about their pets. But with disappointment, he informed the dragon that fruit bats don't drink blood, only vampire bats do. He explained that Carl's had been starving for a whole week. Embarrassed, the dragon admitted this was its first time raising a bat. Ojin scolded it for not doing research beforehand, and pointed out that the cave's freezing temperature could be fatal if the bat woke up from hibernation. The dragon protested that it was an ice dragon, but our guy sternly insisted that this environment was still unsuitable for a bat. Feeling remorseful, the dragon bowed its head in apology to Carl's, promising to get fruit immediately and return the bat to its original home. Grateful for Ojin's help, the dragon offered to grant him one wish as a thank you. He joked that he wanted to be reincarnated as a rich Arab prince or a wealthy, villainous heir. Confused by the strange request, the dragon removed its necklace and gave it to Ojin, explaining that it was a magic pendant, capable of granting any wish, as long as it didn't come from malicious intent. As the pendant began to glow, our protagonist concluded that he must be in the afterlife. Just before disappearing, he quickly wished to go back to the early days of Bitcoin. The dragon watched Ojin vanish, then hurried to prepare fruit for Carl's, still confused about the strange goddess it had summoned. A moment later, our hero found himself standing on a bustling street filled with people, noise, and the aroma of food. Still bewildered, he wondered if this was reincarnation or possession. A fruit vendor, noticing his strange attire, asked if he was a traveler, and explained that he was in the Belmo region, famous for its inns and markets. Before he could answer, chaos erupted as a giant rabbit charged down the street, devouring fallen carrots. People screamed and scattered, but Ojin stood still, amazed at the sight of a monster walking freely among people. The fruit vendor warned him that it was the pet of Lord Belmo and urged him to run. Then, Ojin spotted a little girl crying in front of the rabbit. Without hesitation, our guy dashed forward, grabbing the girl and pulling her out of the way, just before the creature could reach her. As the rabbit charged again, his pendant glowed, and a blue chain manifested around it. The crowd gasped, whispering that he must be a mage. The fruit vendor held her little sister close, remarking that our protagonist didn't look like an ordinary traveler. Lord Belmo quickly arrived, furious to see his pet bound. Ojin explained that the rabbit had nearly attacked a child, but Belmo refused to believe it. Losing his patience, our hero snapped, saying that the worst pet owners are those who ignore their pet's faults, warning that the rabbit's bite could easily crush a skull. The fruit vendor and her sister exchanged approving glances at his directness. Examining the rabbit more closely, Ojin noticed its ears and realized it was the house rabbit, suffering from stress and overfeeding. When he asked about its behavior, Belmo admitted that the rabbit, Elizabeth, often pulled out her own fur. Ojin explained that such stress could be fatal and advised against taking it to crowded places. Once Belmo asked about exercise, our guy suggested letting it move freely at home and not to spoil it. Shocked and ashamed, Belmo burst into tears, admitting that people mocked him for raising a rabbit. But Ojin clearly understood animals better than anyone. Belmo summoned his butler, who gave Ojin a bag of coins and asked him to check on Elizabeth from time to time. After apologizing to his pet, he left with it, while our protagonist muttered that he wouldn't be coming to this place again. Suddenly, people gathered around, cheering and praising Ojin's courage. The fruit vendor thanked him for saving her stall and offered him a discount. But when our hero explained that he had no money, she pointed to the bag. Opening it, he discovered gold coins and bit one to confirm it was real. Realizing this, our guy smiled slightly, thinking that maybe finally he could open another clinic here and pay off his debts from the human world. Mr. Ojin thanked all the candidates for coming to the selection and, half amused, remarked that he hoped one of them would be chosen. Then he announced it was time to start the interviews, calling it a death match. For a moment, our protagonist's thoughts drifted to Lord Belmo, who had generously offered land and money. Ojin decided to settle in this new place. Thanks to that support, the second branch of his pet clinic opened without any difficulty. Lord Belmo even prepared a shop for him, though it was strangely filled with rabbit supplies. Still, our guy didn't mind. After all, it was free, and his connection with Belmo seemed to be invaluable. The business quickly took up all of Ojin's time, but he realized he knew very little about this world, especially about the dragon that had brought him here. That creature had promised to take him home, only to abandon him in this strange land. Determined to find answers, our hero decided to post a notice outside his new shop: Veterinary Hospital, help wanted. Perhaps he would find someone who could handle both assistant and technician duties. As the interviews began, Ojin sat up straight, observing the line of applicants. The first candidate, Thomas, proudly spoke of his noble background, his strict father, and his gentle mother. Our protagonist listened for a moment, but quickly grew tired of the man's self-importance. The next candidate, Philip, claimed his family had been in the animal business for generations. It sounded promising at first, until he revealed they ran a butcher shop. That was enough for Ojin to cross him off the list in his head. Clearly, finding a normal person in this world was harder than expected. The third candidate stepped forward, a man with a pale, tense face and eyes that signaled trouble. Our guy told himself not to judge a book by its cover, but his patience shattered when the man suddenly dropped to the floor, begging to be hired. That was it. Ojin decided from now on he would absolutely judge people by their appearance. Before he could react, a young woman stepped out from the line of applicants. Without a word, she punched the man in the face, sending him flying across the room. She introduced herself as Selena, a wandering animal specialist with experience in basic treatment. Her confidence and composure made a strong impression, so Ojin hired her on the spot. The next afternoon, our protagonist sat in his cozy new clinic, basking in the warm sunlight streaming through the window. It was already noon and Selena still hadn't shown up. Maybe he had been too hasty in hiring again. He was wondering if he should post another hiring notice when there was a knock on the door. Expecting his new assistant, he opened the door, only to find a strange man standing there. A few minutes later, the man was sitting comfortably, sipping tea while Ojin smiled politely. However, inside, our hero was celebrating. He finally had his first customer, marking the first step toward paying off his debt. He thought back to his previous clinic, the one that failed due to his short temper. He vividly remembered snapping at a client who wouldn't brush their dog's teeth, shouting until his reputation as a rude and crazy vet spread like wildfire. This time, however, Ojin was determined to smile, stay calm, and coax the money out of his clients' wallets. Back in the present, he asked about the man's pet. The stranger grinned and pointed to his bag, revealing a small lizard named Pojak. Our guy almost sighed in relief. For once, it seemed to be a normal creature, rather than one of the bizarre animals often seen in this world. That relief didn't last long, as the man casually admitted to pulling its tail until it came off. Ojin fought the urge to scold him and turned his attention to the lizard. He carefully examined Pojak and noticed its skin was dry and red, a clear sign of improper shedding. When he mentioned this, the man warned that Pojak could be aggressive. Almost on cue, the little creature proved him right by spitting a stream of fire straight at our protagonist. Before Ojin could react, Selena burst through the door and pushed him aside, saving him from the attack. The fire scorched the wall behind them. Dazed and with a slightly bleeding mouth, Ojin muttered that getting hit might have been less painful. As he regained his composure, he realized the first patient at the new branch was a salamander, a species of lizard that breathes fire, impossible to handle with bare hands. He wondered if the clinic had anything fireproof. Meanwhile, the man gazed dreamily at Selena, calling her a beauty. She in turn asked him where he found the creature. He proudly explained that he picked it up from the mountain behind the village, claiming it was love at first sight. Selena told him that raising salamanders was illegal, as they were endangered due to overhunting. However, she reassured him that if they said they were temporarily holding it for medical treatment, the authorities would likely look the other way, as long as he released the animal afterward. But the man clutched Pojak tightly, his eyes welling up with tears, and refused to let go. Suddenly he bolted for the door, shouting that no one could separate him from his beloved salamander. Ojin stood there in disbelief, staring at the open doorway. Selina hesitated for a moment, before our hero snapped, telling her to go after him. And just like that, the clinic's first consultation turned into a ridiculous chase through town, a fitting start to another, unpredictable chapter in Ojin's new life. Today, Ojin told Selina to chase the man, and the marketplace erupted into chaos. The fruit vendor, who had just been humming about how peaceful things were, without the Lord's constant interference, quickly realized the peace wasn't going to last. She ducked behind her stall as the noisy crowd rushed past, deciding it was best not to get involved. The man weaved through the crowd, clutching something into his chest with desperate determination, while our guy chased after him, out of breath but unwilling to give up. The vendor watched the chaos and muttered that whatever was happening, it wasn't her business. The fleeing man mumbled frantically about someone trying to steal Pojak from him. Our protagonist and Selina continued the chase until they were exhausted and had to slow down. Panting, she remarked that Ojin needed more exercise. Then, refocusing on the salamander's dire state, he acknowledged the creature's shed skin had piled up dangerously, and it needed help immediately. Selina's expression hardened as she remembered the danger. A salamander that fails to shed its skin will eventually explode, its internal fire destroying everything around it. There was no time to rest. They had to find the creature before disaster struck. Meanwhile, believing he was safe, the man returned home. Relieved, he placed Pojak on the table, calling their being together destiny. His feeling of elation quickly turned into artistic inspiration as he began to sing, letting a strange melody fill the air. Suddenly, panic replaced his creative mood, as Pojak's body trembled and caught fire. In an instant, his house was engulfed in flames. Coughing amidst the smoke, the man tried to reason with the salamander, reaching out as if affection could douse the flames. Pojak responded with another stream of fire, the flames growing more intense. Selina arrived just in time to pull the man to safety, while our hero braced himself against the heat, determined to control the raging creature. He bitterly thought that a fire extinguisher would be useful right now. Then his pendant glowed. As the light faded, Ojin found that exact item in his hand. No time to wonder about this miracle. He charged forward, dousing the flames, until the salamander's resistance weakened and the room fell silent, leaving only the hissing of steam. As the flames died down, Selina checked their surroundings. The man sat amidst the rubble, muttering that the rampage must have been due to a failed shed. He insisted he would take better care of Pojak next time, his tone full of misplaced affection. Our protagonist watched him silently, wondering if this man had any idea what real care truly meant. Not love without understanding. Ojin thought just selfishness disguised as devotion. Later in the forest, Pojak finally shed its skin. Selina remarked it looked much more lively, while our guy gaped at its size. The man looked at the salamander with bittersweet pride, a mix of bitter and sweet, whispering it was time to let it return to the wild. He watched Pojak disappear among the trees, whispering promises of care and remembrance that no creature could understand. But Ojin rolled his eyes at the sappy sentiment, thinking this would only bring more trouble. But the man hardly noticed. But in his mind, this farewell was noble. The moment turned unexpectedly tender when Pojak paused on a distant rock and shot a giant fireball into the sky. The flame blossomed into brilliant bursts of fireworks, painting the sunset with gorgeous colors. The man looked to the sky overcome with emotion, while our protagonist silently acknowledged that finally, the treatment was complete. Days later, that same man reappeared in the town square, now calling himself Royce. He played his guitar by the fountain, children dancing around as he sang a strange song about Ojin's adventures. The song spread like wildfire, lifting the spirits of all who heard it. Selina watched from a distance, half amused, while our hero stood beside her, unimpressed but slightly curious. When he noticed people talking about bringing their pets to him, Ojin even complimented Royce's singing. Soon after, the consequences arrived. Outside Ojin's veterinary clinic, a crowd so large it blocked the road had formed. Dozens of people shouted his name, demanding treatment and craving his attention. Our guy sat in stunned silence, realizing his quiet days were over. Selina looked at the endless line and muttered that maybe she should quit. Amidst the noise and chaos, Ojin realized their small clinic, quite by accident, had become the busiest place in town. It was an ordinary morning. Birds chirped outside Ojin's clinic, as a long line of people gathered at the door. He finished with a patient and informed them the consultation was over, advising a follow-up visit to check on their progress. Selina stood nearby, commenting that at this rate, he'd be a corpse by next week, and should make money while he still could. Our guy called for the next patient, reflecting on how it had been 2 months since the opening, and the second clinic was thriving, partly thanks to those cheerful morning birds. The first few days were tough, with so many clients, but after seeing the revenue, things had settled down. A customer poked their head in asking if they were still open. Selena immediately said they were closed, but Ojin let the person in anyway. While treating a patient, our protagonist reflected on what he'd learned about this world. Outside, people chatted about their pets. One mentioned their Coco wasn't eating well lately. Another pointed to their cat's bloodshot eye. Dogs and cats here were still close to humans, though their illnesses could be quite different. A little later, Ojin stretched, remarking that today was exhausting. Selena informed him the next case was the last one. Curious, he asked what kind of animal it was. Selena explained it was a saman, once used for hunting, now a popular pet, but aggressive with anyone but their owners, leading to the highest abandonment rate. Our hero muttered that people who buy pets just to follow a trend should disappear. He recalled hearing that samans could grow as large as a person, with claws and teeth sharp enough to pierce a boar's hide. Selena warned him to be careful. The next customer brought in a saman pup, looking clearly exhausted and only 2 months old. The owner explained that it had been limping since yesterday. Ojin examined its leg, noting that a puppy this age should have strong joints. While checking its paw, he discovered a thorn embedded in it. He removed it with tweezers, disinfected the wound, and reassured them it would heal. The little saman walked around unsteadily, and our protagonist watched quietly, while Selena glanced over slightly curious. As the owner left, Ojin sighed in relief, saying that the day was finally over. Selena remarked that he looked happy. He seemed confused when she asked if it was because the puppy was cute or because his shift was over. Selena teased that it was rare to see him happy, for reasons other than money. Ojin replied that none of the patients today were seriously injured, and explained that the hardest part of being a veterinarian is seeing animals get sick. The more he cared, the more it hurt, so he tried to keep a detached attitude. His thoughts wandered to a client from his old World One, who had left their pet for an extra month, while on vacation. Our guy recalled, greeting them harshly, and realized that since then, he had started scolding guardians more often. As closing time neared, Selena noticed it was getting dark. Ojin mentioned the large number of clients and urged her to move faster before the sunset. Suddenly, the man from the interview the other day appeared outside, screaming for help. Ojin turned to Selena asking if she could perform an exorcism. She replied that maybe she could, if physical attacks actually worked on spirits. The man burst in, grabbing our protagonist and dragging him out through the window, leaving Selena speechless. Later in the forest, Ojin lay on the ground, while the man apologized repeatedly, insisting that he hadn't expected our hero to be too weak to climb a hill. Ojin demanded to know who he was, realizing this wasn't a ghost. The man introduced himself as Mango, an administrative civil servant for the territory, and explained that he had brought the protagonist. Our heroes arrive. After hearing about the Lord's talent for calming the rabbit, Juan asks him to catch a stray dog. Ojin refuses, stating that he's a veterinarian, not an animal rescuer. Selena appears nearby, bluntly stating that they are not a rescue team. Juan insists they are his only remaining hope, explaining that 2 months ago, the stray dog took up a spot halfway up the mountain, right where their new trail construction is about to begin. They have tried to catch it, but the dog is too fast, and the construction will begin the day after tomorrow. If they can't catch it, soldiers will be dispatched and the animal will be killed on sight. Our hero falls silent, before finally asking where the dog is now, making it clear that he has never captured an animal and just wants to observe first. Agreeing, Juan agrees, stating it's a little further up the mountain. Ojin reminds him that he hasn't agreed yet. He's only going there to take a look. Selena, with a knowing smile, remarks that he's definitely going to do it anyway. At the scene, Juan points out where the stray dog usually stays. Suddenly, a noise catches their attention, and a saman appears from the shadows. Ojin recognizes it immediately, while Selena notes that many people raise samans, but just as many end up abandoning them. Nowadays, many people raise samans because it has become a trend, but most end up neglected and forgotten. As Ojin observes the condition of the saman before him, he can tell it has been living alone for nearly 2 months, and has probably not been eating properly during that time. Suddenly, a strange sound echoes from the forest, startling everyone. Assuming it's some kind of monster, our protagonist turns towards the sound, just as the saman lets out a piercing bark and lunges at him. Selena quickly steps in, pulling our boy out of harm's way, and warning that it's dangerous to stand too close. Ojin remarks that turning your back and running from a dog, that's angry, is the worst response, while Selena retorts that doing nothing would have just let the animal tear them to shreds. Afterward, our hero explains that running away will only provoke the creature further. They need to find a way to redirect its focus. Before he can finish his thought, the saman suddenly stands still. Everyone is stunned, astonished by the sudden calm, and our protagonist wonders why it stopped. He recalls Juan describing the animal as a hunting dog, and points out that such a creature, if truly angry, would not back down so easily. Yet right before their eyes, the shaman silently walks back into the forest. Selena murmurs that no one can truly understand what goes on inside a dog's head. Meanwhile, Juan explains how this creature regularly chases people away. Its behavior has become such a nuisance that villagers from nearby settlements constantly send complaints. As Ojin listens, he becomes lost in thought before his curiosity is piqued. He asks what kind of complaints they've received, and Juan describes how the locals call the animal a ferocious beast that roams the mountain, an animal they consider dangerous, and demand must be captured. Our hero ponders this, then wonders if anyone has ever actually been injured by it. Juan instinctively starts to agree, but after a moment's hesitation, he admits that not a single person has ever been harmed. Turning to Selena, our protagonist, recalls she once mentioned the loyalty of shamans to their owners, and asks if she still believes that. Selena confirms that she does, and Ojin's expression shifts slightly, as if something has just clicked in his mind. The next morning, Ojin and Selena set out for the nearest village at the foot of the mountain. Their focus shifts from confronting the stray dog to uncovering the story behind it. Now, our boy searches for the dog's former owner, believing that understanding its past is the key to approaching it. Though time is running out, and other methods might seem easier, he knows that simply trapping the animal with food won't work. The dog's emaciated, starving body speaks of something stronger than instinct, an unbreakable bond that hunger cannot conquer. As they walk, memories and thoughts intertwine in Ojin's mind. He recalls how some owners give a gentle command for their pet to stay, assuring them they'll be back soon, only to disappear and never return. It must be this same kind of loyalty and betrayal that lies at the heart of this dog's suffering. Our protagonist has seen people capable of abandoning those who trust them most, and the thought fills him with a quiet rage. With determination, our hero vows to himself that when they finally find the owner, that person will be forced to confront what they've done and witness how the loyal creature they left behind has suffered. As they begin asking around the village, a pattern quickly emerges. One local tells Ojin that the husband of a woman named Gabriel has been unable to continue his work because of the dog roaming the mountain. Parents don't let their children near the woods, afraid of what lurks there. And even children passing by repeat the same tales of danger. Similarly, an old man mumbles vaguely about losing money years ago, though his words seem unrelated to the rest. However, one truth becomes clear. The entire village harbors a deep resentment towards the stray dog. After hours of inquiries, our boy and Selena stop on a quiet street corner. Weary from hearing the same fearful stories, Ojin begins to suspect that perhaps the dog's owner is not from this village. Selena agrees, noting that if nothing else, everyone they've met shares a common hostility toward the animal. It is then that a woman with long hair approaches them. She had overheard their questions, and with a solemn expression, she mentions they are looking for Jack, the man who used to own the dog. She urges them to follow her and leads them to Jack's house. Ojin notes how remote the house is, almost hidden among the trees, and the woman explains that Jack lived alone, separate from the villagers. That's why so few people knew of him. As they reach the small wooden house, she stops near a grave, humble at the entrance, and quietly reveals that Jack died 2 months ago in a landslide. She explains that he had no family, and she herself handled the funeral arrangements. Furthermore, she insists that Jack never abandoned his dog. He simply never came back. The woman also confesses she once tried to bring the dog home, but failed. And now, with a heavy sadness in her voice, she pleads with them to help the animal she calls Max. The weight of her words sinks deep into Ojin. A quiet remorse floods his heart as he realizes how wrong he was in his judgment of the situation. So deeply, our hero silently prays for Jack's peace, expressing his regret, and makes a firm promise that they will save Max no matter what it takes. Later, back in the forest, Juan tells the newly arrived officers that he had expected them the next day, noting they must have completed their previous mission earlier than expected. He suggests postponing the current mission to kill Max until tomorrow, but the officers dismiss the idea. One of them insists there's no reason to wait, and the matter should be dealt with immediately. Since the villagers already hate the dog, he reasons, no one would object if they finished a day earlier than planned. Upon returning to Jack's house, Ojin steps inside and immediately notices the scent of herbal medicine lingering in the air, a clear sign that Jack was a physician. Selena suggests taking anything with the owner's scent for now, and points to a few articles of clothing hanging nearby. Our hero's gaze drifts to a picture frame on a shelf, showing Jack and Max together. He wonders what could have happened to someone who cared so deeply for his dog. Then, Selena notices a picture on the wall and points to it. It's a photograph of a mandrake plant. She remarks that Jack must have been searching for such a plant. Our boy recalls seeing a mandrake in a movie, and Selena explains that it's the screaming plant, a rare and extremely difficult specimen to harvest. They both recall the strange sound from the forest the day before. Despite its danger, the mandrake is incredibly valuable, something every physician dreams of finding. Meanwhile, Max sits before his cave looking up at the sky, lost in thought as he remembers his master. It was raining that day when he and Jack took shelter in the cave. Jack's eyes crinkled in a smile at the downpour, idly wondering if they should wait until it stopped before leaving. Starting a fire, he placed a woolen blanket on Max, telling him to stay put or he'd catch a cold. Max snuggled closer, and Jack, though exhausted, still smiled, and said they were lucky to have found shelter. While looking around, Jack noticed a plant growing near the cave wall. Recognizing the shape of the leaves, he realized it was a mandrake. Amazed, he admitted he never thought he'd see one outside of a book. Excited, he decided to return home for his tools, telling Max to wait and promising to be right back. Max whined softly, but Jack reassured him it wasn't far. Smiling at Max, he stepped out into the rain. Then a sudden landslide, with giant boulders crashing down, killed him instantly. Time passed. The fire in the cave died out, but Max continued to wait faithfully. And the following week, a few tourists passed by. One of them noticed the dog had been there for a while. They assumed it had been abandoned and out of pity decided to feed it. But as they approached, Max growled and backed away in fear, chasing them off. Startled, the tourists left, muttering that the dog was dangerous, and it was no wonder its owner had left it. Max returned to the cave and sat down waiting, unaware that Jack would never return. But now, as Max was reminiscing, the officials approached. One suggested there was no need to rush as it was getting late. They should head home and rest soon. Standing before Max, they prepared a tranquilizer dart, enough to knock out a saman. Juan pleaded with them to wait just one more hour, explaining that he had hired people to help rescue the dog. From what Juan had seen, Max had never listened to anyone, and was simply a dog, with its own story. The officer was unmoved, saying they weren't there to hear a dog's story. Their job was to protect the people, and that was all that mattered. As he raised his rifle and aimed, Max gasped. Just as the officer was about to pull the trigger, Selena and Ojin arrived to stop him. Selena insisted that they must rescue the stray dog, not harm it. Just then, Max saw an illusion of his master standing before him, smiling gently. The figure said that he had come to pick him up, and that Max had waited a long time. Overjoyed, Max moved forward, wagging his tail, believing his master had finally returned. Our protagonist stepped closer, his voice low and gentle, as he acknowledged he was not the one Max was waiting for, but told him it was time to go home. A silent night enveloped the forest, where a deer was running for its life, pursued by a wild creature with glowing yellow eyes that pierced through the darkness. Its piercing scream echoed through the trees, shattering the silence of the forest. The next morning, the quiet inside Ojin's clinic was broken when a client burst in, frantically pleading for help for their pet. Our hero looked down and saw a raccoon, Ping so fat it could hardly roll over. He mumbled in disbelief, while the owner insisted that the raccoon had become weak and was barely eating, now down to only 7 meals a day. Ojin sighed, warning that if it didn't return to a healthy weight, it could become seriously ill. The owner looked shocked, unwilling to believe it, and our boy called for the next patient, without another word. Juan entered with his usual polite smile, greeting our protagonist respectfully. Seeing him reminded Ojin of Max, the dog that had come down from the mountain after losing its owner. Max had lingered by his master's grave for days, unable to accept Jack's death, pitied by everyone in the village, until finally, it opened its heart to the one who had visited and cared for it, Juan. As Ojin asked what brought him here, and if something had happened to Max, Juan denied it, and instead pulled out a mandrake from his bag. Selena noticed something strange about it. Its roots were exposed above the ground, unlike most plants, as mandrakes prefer to be deep underground. Juan explained that Jack, before he died, had discovered the mandrake and decided to keep it as a memento. However, when they tried to replant it, the mandrake kept pushing itself out of the ground, screaming incessantly day and night, until everyone in the village had to wear earplugs. Some even suffered ruptured eardrums. Selena mentioned that such behavior could be because mandrakes are known to be very picky about their surroundings. Juan sighed that the plant had become unmanageable, noting it was only silent now because it was sleeping. But once it woke up, the chaos would begin. He begged Ojin to take it. Our protagonist refused, insisting he only treated animals, not plants, and that anything that screams could not be considered a plant. Juan insisted that it was neither plant nor animal, but something much worse, a demon. Ojin retorted that if so, the church would be a better place to take it. Before they could say another word, the mandrake stirred. Juan panicked, shouted that it was waking up, and hastily left it behind, along with his companion fleeing the clinic, before our hero could stop them. Frustrated, Ojin cursed under his breath, muttering that he had seen people abandon many things, but had never seen anyone abandon a plant. Selena quickly used a glass shield to cover the mandrake and reminded him that mandrakes were precious herbs. Every part of them, from leaves to roots, could save the life of a dying person. Our boy grumbled about their value if they couldn't be controlled. Suddenly the mandrake opened its eyes. Selena warned him to cover his ears before it screamed, fearing for their eardrums. Ojin, in a panic, complained about the lack of noise-canceling headphones and braced himself. But instead of screaming, the mandrake smiled, confused. He looked at Selena, studying its behavior. She realized it seemed to like him and told him to take out his necklace. As soon as he did, the plant's eyes widened and it began to dance with joy. Our protagonist could hardly believe it, while Selena laughed, saying it looked as happy as a sunflower toy she once saw. He mumbled that the comparison sounded disgusting, but Selena just told him to keep it in his room for now. Despite his protests, he eventually did so. That night, a loud knock on the door woke our hero. Half awake, he complained that a nighttime visit would cost extra, until a woman burst in with an injured dog bleeding profusely. Seeing the deep gashes, our protagonist mumbled that the wounds were too severe to stop the bleeding. Selena reminded him that mandrake leaves have strong blood-clotting properties, and at his instruction, she approached the plant. The mandrake looked at her suspiciously, so she hesitantly suggested Ojin should ask it himself. He grumbled about the absurdity of having to ask a plant for permission, but did so anyway. As soon as he asked for a leaf, the mandrake smiled, danced, and hummed softly. Though confused, our boy took the leaf and stopped the bleeding, successfully saving the dog's life. The woman cried with gratitude, while our protagonist yawned and told her to return for a follow-up before going back to bed. But only half an hour later, another urgent knock disturbed his sleep. This time a man stood at the door, with a savagely attacked deer in his arms, pleading for help. The animal's body was covered in brutal wounds, and Ojin gravely noted that they were not from a hunt, but from someone who seemed to enjoy cruelty. He mumbled about some psychopath being responsible, leaving the villager confused, asking if it was some new kind of monster. A little girl quietly explained that it was the Baron's pet wolf, and that Baron Dolly does such things for entertainment. The protagonist's disbelief turned to outrage. He cursed the nobleman, demanding to know how such behavior was allowed, shouting about the lack of animal protection laws. The villagers reminded him that the Baron was untouchable, a nobleman. Our hero protested the injustice, shouting about freedom, law, and democracy, concepts the others had never even heard of, until Selena reminded him to focus on treating the deer. A week later, chaos erupted outside the clinic. A large crowd had gathered, all screaming for the doctor to save their pets. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Ojin joined the uproar, yelling that he couldn't live like this anymore, and calling for a class revolution. Our boy led the crowd toward Dolly's mansion, chanting accusations against the Baron and demanding justice for the mistreated animals until the Baron's guards arrived. When they asked for our protagonist, he mumbled that their intelligence was frighteningly fast and stepped forward stating his name. But to his surprise, the guards bowed and respectfully escorted him to the castle. Inside, he found a giant blood-toothed wolf lying on the floor, gravely injured. Baron Dolly stood beside it, desperately pleading with Ojin to save his beloved pet, promising anything in return. Our hero and Selena stood frozen, stunned at the sight of the very creature that had caused so much suffering. After a week of beastly attacks, the villagers gathered, whispering about a mysterious creature spotted in the western forest. A rumor spread that the exiled wolf had been killed by a giant man-eating monster that was now lurking in the woods, attacking people after hunting animals. Fear gripped the crowd. Some believed the village was doomed and talked of fleeing to the lower settlement. Others insisted there was no need to worry, as Baron Dolly had launched a monster subjugation campaign. They mentioned a giant trap set in the woods and soldiers patrolling day and night. The villagers praised the Baron as trustworthy, believing they were safe under his protection. Our hero listened fully, aware of the completely different truth. He recalled seeing the Baron crying and screaming, ordering his men to catch the monster that had attacked his child, while the servants tried to reassure him and quietly handle the situation. To Ojin, the scene resembled media manipulation from his world. Selena stood beside him, noticing the guarded look on his face. Our protagonist mused that most of the animals brought injured to the clinic were attacked near the eastern forest, close to the village, while the incident with the Baron's wolf happened deep in the west. Despite this, the Baron's men continued to focus their search in the western forest, completely ignoring the east. Selena also found it suspicious. Villagers rarely set foot in the western forest, a place rumored to be haunted. As they were discussing, a man from the glass workshop called them in, announcing that the items Ojin had ordered, the syringes, were ready. They were mouth-blown, reinforced glass mixed with albumin powder, capable of withstanding heat and shock. Our protagonist inspected them, impressed by the craftsmanship, calling the technology remarkable and marveling that they were handmade. The craftsman confessed the process was difficult and insisted he couldn't make more. But Ojin paid him very generously, establishing a partnership, despite the man's reluctance. Gradually, the clinic was filled with new equipment. Renovations began, and Selena inspected the layout, surprised by the modern, organized structure. Our boy thought to himself that finally, the place felt like a real hospital. One day, he introduced various types with different effects. They stood gathered around the shattered trap. A roar echoed through the trees. The soldiers advanced, declaring that the monster was cornered. The small cat was meowing angrily. Everyone fell silent. The soldiers hesitated, remarking it looked like an ordinary stray cat. But the Baron insisted it was the creature that had terrified his wolf, pointing to its claws and teeth as proof of its evil nature. Ojin realized the soldiers were serious when they threw a net over the cat. The animal struggled and cried out, while the Baron laughed, ordering it to be burned alive. Our protagonist objected, but the Baron demanded the cat be dragged away alive for a public execution. Looking at the terrified animal, our hero recalled his own world, where a man had once brought a cat that was injured to the clinic, explaining that he used to feed it in the shopping district before someone heard. But Ojin called such people demons, hating animal abusers more than anything else. Back in the present, the cat tore through the net, sending the soldiers into a panic, shouting to trap it again. Suddenly, our guy had an idea. He yelled for everyone to cover their mouths and noses, then pointed to the cat's forehead. An M-shaped scar glowed faintly on its forehead. He declared it the mark of a great demon, the bringer of a global plague. The mark of Corona. The pandemic. Ojin declared the cat a demon, the embodiment of the pandemic. He claimed that the plague first spread through rats, then moved to a cat that had eaten the infected rodents and absorbed their dark magic, becoming an even more potent carrier. But according to our protagonist, this cat was the source of the coming catastrophe. He warned that once the plague started to spread, half the population would disappear. The people who were already prepared to kill the cat listened with skepticism. The soldiers scoffed at his claim, and even Baron Dolly pressed him for the truth, doubting our hero's story. Despite their skepticism, Ojin remained firm, recalling a world very much like this one that had once fought against a pandemic of its own, a world of masks, fear, and chaos. He insisted the creature might indeed carry demonic energy, but was still young enough to be suppressed. Our guy added that in his world, a cure had been found, and the same could happen here. Turning to Selena, Ojin silently hoped she would back up his lie. She did, calmly explaining that with the cat's blood and the right herbs, a cure could be made. Outwardly calm, our hero worried his ploy might fail. The soldiers sneered, calling the story ridiculous. But before tensions could rise, the Baron gave Ojin 1 week. During that time, he had to heal the creature and present it at the castle. Afterward, the cat would be publicly executed. Back at the clinic, our protagonist breathed a sigh of relief, thanking Selena for her quick thinking and impressed with how she played along so convincingly. She replied that she wasn't lying. Technically, a cure could be made using this creature and ginseng root, though it would require hundreds of ginseng bulbs. She asked why he wanted to save the animal, warning that once it awakened, its power might be uncontrollable. Ojin explained that this cat wasn't the one causing the attacks in the village. He showed her the records of the animal wounds, pointing out that the injuries differed in both size and shape from what the cat could have inflicted. Instead, the wound pattern suggested a completely different predator. Selena quickly realized the truth. Mama Baron Dolly's wolf must be the real culprit, and the cat was just defending itself. Our protagonist agreed, but found it suspicious that the Baron, who had previously covered up Mama's attacks, would suddenly blame another beast and start a hunt out in the open. He suspected the hunt was just a cover, with the real target being the cat. Selena remarked that this would explain why the Baron wanted the creature captured alive instead of killed, and why he had accepted the unlikely explanation from Ojin so easily. The comment about his clumsy lie irked our hero, but his attention quickly turned to the cat's wounds, the scar on its forehead. It wasn't an ordinary wound, and the old scars along its legs suggested it had been suffering for a long time. He became determined to uncover the truth of what this creature had endured. Selena watched him closely, realizing he wasn't the greedy, indifferent veterinarian she had once thought. There was a gentleness in the way he handled the animal, until our guy suddenly hugged the cat, burying his face in its fur and calling it soft and warm. The sight shattered Selena's previous impression, convincing her that Ojin was simply crazy, while the nearby ginseng simmered with jealousy. The next morning, strange cries echoed from outside the clinic. Villagers gathered, whispering in awe and fear about the bizarre sounds. Rumors spread quickly, suggesting our hero was battling a demon and purifying the source of the plague. Within hours, public opinion had turned him into a legend, a sorcerer from another world. The crowd chanted his name, hailing Kimojin as the great sorcerer. Inside, unaware of the growing commotion, our protagonist tried to feed the cat, only to get his face scratched again. The creature's temper frustrated him, but he noticed it seemed smaller than before. Selina pointed out that both its size and weight had decreased over the past 3 days, and she speculated that it might be losing its demonic energy, but Ojin concluded it was simply starving. Its hunger was fueling its anger, burning through its energy, and making its hunger worse, in a vicious cycle. As our hero wished for a demonic snack, called choro, a sudden pain shot through his chest. The dragon's necklace around his neck glowed, emitting a light that solidified into a familiar, chocolate-like treat. The snack flew straight into the cat's mouth, and it began to munch happily. Ojin was relieved, continuing to feed it with growing affection, while Selina watched silently in disbelief. As the cat ate, the scar on its forehead began to glow faintly. Selina held her breath, suddenly realizing everything made sense. The creature before them had never been just a cat. It was a monoceros, a horned lion. It had once reigned as a mythical beast, in an age when dragons vanished and mana rose across the world, revered as sacred. Their horns blessed barren lands with water and turned darkness into light. Their hearts held the wondrous power to create mana, and the horn on their foreheads acted as a divine channel for that energy to flow. However, those who dared to touch them faced certain death, inescapable. After the great mana famine, their species dwindled, forcing them to disguise themselves as smaller creatures to survive. Though weakened, they never lost the pride of their divine lineage and could never be tamed by mortals, save for a single spirit healer entity. At the clinic, the little cat finally went to the bathroom, and Ojin, relieved, praised it while feeding it choro. Selina observed, wondering if it was wise to keep luring the creature with this demonic snack. That same night at Baron Dolly's mansion, a spy reported to him that the cat was eating obediently, and that our guy held it in his arms like a child. The Baron, skeptical, listened as his soldiers knelt beside him. Their voices were uneasy. They spoke of the demon lion and the rumored plague, warning that the creature might not be ordinary. They recalled that no human had ever tamed a monoceros, even a weakened one. In the worst-case scenario, the mana inside their bodies could turn to poison, transforming them into living bombs. Their power, they said, could destroy an entire nation. Baron Dolly, uneasy, recalled the words of Ojin about a plague that had once ravaged his world, a battle humanity had fought for years. He also remembered that monoceros was supposed to refuse all food offered by humans. Now he began to wonder if our protagonist knew something that no one else did. The next morning, the clinic bustled with activity. The new assistant Pio manned the front desk, calling the next patient into the examination room. The space felt lively and organized, like a proper clinic should. Meanwhile, Selina scolded a noisy patient whose animal wouldn't sit still. Her irritation grew, and in a fit of temper, she silenced the commotion with a magic spell, startling everyone. Ojin, horrified, watched her repeat the spell on another client, causing chaos in the clinic. Then, without a word of warning, Selina abruptly took a half-day off and disappeared again. Later, our protagonist discovered her handwritten note, announcing an unauthorized absence. The scribbled handwriting only fueled his frustration. He complained that even real veterinarians didn't act so unprofessionally. Desperate for help, that's why he'd called Pio, a nearby acquaintance, to fill in temporarily. To his surprise, Pio proved to be incredibly competent, handling clients, carrying supplies, and maintaining order with cheerful diligence. Her work ethic impressed our guy so much that he started considering her for a permanent position. In the midst of a busy day, Ojin noticed something strange. The clinic, usually filled with the sounds of animals, had suddenly gone silent. The next morning, the mystery was solved when a familiar patient returned. The hamster Ping Ping. Ojin stared in disbelief. The creature, once weighing less than a pound, now looked 10 times larger, almost the size of a small dog. He wondered if it had turned into a panda. The owner corrected him, calling it a flopper dog. It was only then that our guy realized, in this world, hamsters had a different name. The owner was confused by his reaction, asking if he even knew what a flopper was. Ojin tried to cover his tracks, but the quick-witted Pio stepped in, explaining that he came from another world. That's why he used different terms, and his medical knowledge was far beyond the locals' understanding. Flattered, our protagonist listened. As the owner concluded he must have studied abroad, proud and amused, he immediately hired Pio as a full-time employee. Returning to Ping Ping, Ojin examined its oversized body. The creature looked healthy, though its unusual color and size raised many questions. He speculated it might have absorbed some kind of growth magic. as he watched the cat next to him, became visibly jealous and pounced on the hamster. The moment it touched, Ping Ping split into 3 identical copies. Everyone in the clinic was speechless. Ojin tried to process what he was seeing, his mind protesting that it violated every law of physics he knew. The owner, overjoyed, hugged all 3 creatures, declaring that after years of being alone, Ping Ping finally had a family. One of the smaller copies darted across the room, sparking a chaotic chase around the clinic. The creature's small body made them unexpectedly fast, adding to the commotion. Selena's sudden return, appearing from thin air, was with effortless precision. She caught all 3, 2 in her hands and 1 between her teeth, and declared them to be Blue Ba. When asked about their origin, the owner admitted he had received the creature as a gift from his father, unaware of its true nature. Selena decided to keep them for observation, assuring the owner that no harm would come to them. Ojin added that the clinic never conducted unethical experiments, and that nothing would happen without the guardian's consent, though he inwardly wondered why he was the one preaching ethics. That evening, Selena explained that Blue Ba were not natural creatures at all, but artificial life forms created by a mad wizard long ago. Our guy was amazed, realizing that even this world had its share of mad scientists. Selena stressed that the wizard wasn't entirely evil, just misguided, and that his creations, though unstable, were never meant to cause harm. Ojin commented that Blue Ba were thought to have disappeared a century ago, and was surprised to encounter one after such a long time. Curiosity got the better of him, and he casually asked Selena how old she was. Before she could answer, a strange gurgling sound came from the nearby Skulljo. Nearby, our protagonist turned toward it with concern, when a knock at the door interrupted. From behind the door, a soldier's voice announced that Baron Dali had arrived. As the Baron entered Ojin's clinic and declared he was taking the monster, our protagonist was thrown into a panic, silently debating whether to hide the cat or help it escape. He'd had a week, but he hadn't had time to prepare. Every moment had been spent caring for the creature. Forcing a nervous smile, our guy politely greeted the nobleman, his mind racing back to Selena, who had vanished and left him alone to deal with the mess. The Baron plopped down, uninterested in pleasantries, even refusing the offer of tea, and demanded to see the monster immediately. Ojin hesitated, mumbling that the treatment wasn't finished. But the Baron coldly pointed out that if the clinic was still open, the treatment must be complete. Our guy quickly invented a wild story. An incident during the exorcism had created a mysterious mark between him and the cat. That bound them together so they could no longer be separated. The Baron's men exchanged skeptical glances, muttering that he must be insane to expect anyone to believe such nonsense. Realizing his story was falling apart, our protagonist switched tactics, questioning why the Baron was keeping another black cat in his mansion's dungeon. The accusation startled the nobleman. For a moment, his composure faltered. He pressed his attack, accusing him of plotting to switch the real cat with an innocent one. The Baron, angry and defensive, denied it, deflecting by insisting that the animal attacks plaguing the village weren't caused by Sansa, but by Ojin's own recklessness. Our guy countered that the real culprit was the Baron's wolf, presenting a medical chart as evidence. The wounds on the victim matched the wolf's claws. One of the men snatched the documents, tore them to shreds, and mocked him. Our protagonist could only grit his teeth, silently, cursing this world's lack of digital records. Suddenly, one of the Baron's men pushed Ojin aside and reached for Sansa's cage. The cat hissed and swiped, clawing at the intruder. Our guy's thoughts raced. Summoning a steel cage would reveal too much, and any sign of a weapon could make things worse. He clutched the pendant on his neck, debating whether to risk using its power, knowing that such an act could change everything. Before a decision could be made, the door burst open. Several elves entered, led by Selena, and a tall man with long white hair. The newcomer's voice boomed with authority as he ordered everyone to stand down. The Baron recognized him instantly. The insignia of the World Tree, the single circle engraved on his forehead, all were signs of Kallian, the head of the High Inspection Agency, of the 6 Western regions, and a guardian of the Ezrin Guild. The Baron stammered a greeting, masking his discomfort, with a sarcastic remark about the irony of such a sacred guild appearing in a shabby clinic. Ojin bristled at the insult but held his tongue. Kallian announced that they were here in response to a report of a divine beast in danger. Our guy stared, momentarily distracted by the elves' ethereal appearance, as if a movie character had walked into real life. He suddenly realized this must be why Selena had been gone for days. As she handed the cage to Kallian, it dawned on him. Her slightly pointed ears had always been a clue. She was an elf too. Selena warned her superior to be careful, stressing that this cat was extremely aggressive. Kallian began to chant, enveloping Sansa in a sphere of blue light. as the creature floated weightlessly. He examined the wound on top of its head, noting it resembled a cross-section of a world tree branch, a mark left by a mana extractor, a device used to drain the essence of divine creatures. His calm expression turned to fury as he turned to the Baron, demanding to know if he was the one who had cut off the Monoceros Sansa's horn. The nobleman trembled, protesting his innocence, then fled in a panic when pressed further. Our protagonist watched in awe, realizing the power and influence of elves here surpassed even that of the nobility. He couldn't help but feel a thrill at this display of power. Meanwhile, Kalyan remarked that only a few weapons could injure a divine beast in such a way, and promised the truth would soon be exposed. He thanked Ojin for protecting the creature, and announced they would take the Monoceros into their care. Before they could act, Sansa's energy surged. The cat broke through the magical barrier, darting forward, and burying itself in our guy's arms, pressing close as if afraid to leave him. The elves were stunned into silence, a divine creature, seeking comfort from a human. Sansa clung to Ojin's necklace, its body trembling. Kalyan's eyes narrowed as he studied the pendant. Recognition dawned in his eyes. He whispered to his companions that the rumors were true, and the implications were greater than expected. Our protagonist felt uncomfortable under the scrutiny. It was the same look his university professor had given him before trying to recruit him for grad school. Even Selena was now looking at him with an unreadable expression. After a long silence, Kalyan decided to entrust Sansa to Ojin, explaining that, although standard procedure was to take both human and beast to headquarters, for investigation Selena's presence provided enough trust. She just shrugged, her boredom evident. Our guy couldn't help but wonder about her lack of enthusiasm, wondering how she could remain so calm through it all. Kalyan performed another spell, creating an exquisite collar and placing it around Sansa's neck. The charm glowed faintly with protective magic, designed to help the creature regain its strength in place of its lost horn. Sansa fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable with the new jewelry. One of the elves explained that the charm also contained an emergency signal, allowing them to sense immediately if the creature was in danger. But Ojin was amazed by their magical sophistication. It was practically an automatic rescue system. Kalyan then produced a ring and offered it to our hero as a gift of thanks, half honored and half worried about the strings the gift might carry. Kalyan smiled kindly and insisted on placing it on his hand himself. Awkwardly, our protagonist allowed it. The elves murmured their approval, commenting that the ring suited him perfectly. He glanced at the gleaming ring on his finger, still unsure what fate he had just stepped into. Ojin had been single since birth, and now the first ring of his life was on his hand, an elven ring, glowing faintly with a magic that felt far too suspicious. Something about it made him uneasy. He tried to refuse politely, apologizing, and saying he couldn't accept such a gift. Kalyan, puzzled, asked why. But our hero explained that as someone who works with his hands, accessories only got in the way. Kalyan suggested he think of it as armor, instead of jewelry, though inwardly, he noted Ojin seemed completely clueless. However, our protagonist remained firm, repeating that wearing anything on his hand would interfere with his work as a doctor. Kalyan didn't argue further. Instead, he muttered a short spell, and the ring dissolved into light, reshaping itself into a tattoo on Ojin's finger. It looked unexpectedly cool. Kalyan instructed him to place the symbol over his heart and say his family name. As Ojin did, his finger glowed, and a three-dimensional projection of Kalyan appeared before him. The elf explained that the magic allowed for remote communication, a spell that transmitted voice and image, and invited him to try saying light. Our guy repeated the word, and a small beam shot out from his fingertip. The elves watched with amusement, as he waved his hand excitedly, genuinely impressed by the spell. Kalyan reassured him there were other functions he would discover in time, but most important was the protective charm embedded within it. Ojin expressed his gratitude, still marveling that the ring had become a tattoo that looked so advanced. Selena watched with a hint of amusement, recalling how firmly he had rejected the ring, but now seemed pleased with the outcome. Kalyan's attention shifted to the necklace around our protagonist's neck, and a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. As Ojin explained, it came from a dragon. The elves were all stunned. Dragons were thought to have disappeared 1,000 years ago. He clarified that he'd heard the same, but explained he once treated a dragon's sick pet as a healer. In return, the dragon gave him a necklace and promised to send him home. But instead, Ojin accidentally ended up in this world. He once again realized how everyone here was deeply knowledgeable about magic. Our hero asked if anyone knew how to get him back home. Before he could finish speaking, all three elves' eyes went wide. They looked at him and knelt down. They began to chant reverently to the spirit of healing, thanking fate for the honor of meeting him. Ojin froze in confusion. They really thought he was some kind of deity. Our boy protested, insisting they were mistaken. He was just an ordinary human, caught up in a dragon's mistake over its pet, and the dragon's pet wasn't even seriously ill, just neglected. However, Kalyan pointed out that he still received a necklace, imbued with a dragon's power. Ojin mumbled that he only took it as payment, after being thrown into another world against his will. Kalyan solemnly took his hand and explained that their world was facing a crisis, a severe lack of mana. The sacred energy that sustained all life was fading. Once it flowed abundantly, but ever since the dragons went extinct, it had been diminishing, causing divine beasts to disappear and the world itself to wither. If this depletion continued, the next generation would not be able to survive. To combat this, the world's leaders established the Azuran Order, an organization dedicated to preserving mana and restoring balance. Our protagonist, only half listening, interpreted this as some kind of magical environmental agency. Kalyan continued, saying that an ancient legend spoke of a healing spirit, a being wielding the authority of a dragon who would one day save the world. As he said this, all eyes turned to Ojin. He pointed at himself skeptically, asking if they were really talking about him. Kalyan nodded solemnly, confirming they had awaited his arrival for centuries. As our hero tried again to explain that they were completely mistaken, the elves bowed deeply, pledging their lives to serve the spirit of healing him. The Celestin clan and the Order of Azuran both vowed to protect him. Our protagonist felt the weight of their reverence pressing down on him, and his mind reeled. He wanted to scream that it was all absurd, that the dragon that brought him here was surely insane. In his heart, he cursed the creature, wondering what kind of joke this was. The next morning, the chaos of divine misunderstandings gave way to the familiar routine at his clinic. A client arrived with a flying fish, explaining that it could no longer fly. Ojin examined it carefully and determined its nutrition was fine. It was simply aging. The owner looked disappointed, asking if there was any way to slow the process or help it fly again. Our protagonist gently explained that aging is natural and unavoidable, something that must be accepted. The owner hesitated, then confided that her bedridden father had loved flying fish his entire life. He used to raise several, but since he fell ill, they weakened one by one, and now only one Lumi remained. It was her mother's proposal gift. Decades ago, when her father proposed to her mother, he released Lumi into the night sky, its fins glowing and sparkling like a star. Back then, flying fish could emit light as they soared, making them prized companions for festivals and celebrations. Listening, Ojin thought that proposing with a fish instead of a ring sounded cheesy, while Selena explained that it used to be considered romantic. The owner smiled faintly, admitting that's no longer the case. She continued, saying that after her mother passed away, her father's health declined, and he now spent his lonely days caring for his remaining fish. Recently, the owner's father had confessed that if Lumi lost its ability to fly, he would have no reason left to live. Our boy recognized the sadness behind the story, like the last leaf clinging to a branch before winter. Selena, unmoved, casually suggested buying a new fish, which shocked him with her lack of empathy. The owner, on the verge of tears, begged our hero to heal Lumi to save her father from despair, but our protagonist could only repeat that Lumi was perfectly healthy. It was simply getting old, and not even magic could stop time. The owner insisted that Lumi had to fly again to save her father from death, despite Ojin's explanation that Lumi wasn't sick, just aging. He sensed how dangerous emotional attachment could be. Even in this world, pet owners grew deeply attached to their companions. Some would refuse to eat until their pets recovered, while others wanted to die with them. Such emotions often did more harm than good. Suddenly, Kalyan appeared, urging Ojin to make a promise. Before our protagonist could react, the scene blurred and he woke up. It was all a dream. In the morning, our hero greeted Pio, who immediately noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She confessed she'd been up all night too. Pio assumed he was worried about Lumi, the flying fish, though he denied it. She mused that the fish's condition might not be due to aging, but a lack of mana. She recalled that when she was little, the light of the flying fish had dimmed as the world's mana began to decline, and as the mana in the air weakened, the fish gradually lost their ability to fly. Ojin realized the situation was very similar to environmental pollution in his world. The ecosystem here was collapsing in a similar way. He recalled the elves' words about him being destined to save this world. Selena joined the conversation, confirming the problem wasn't limited to flying fish. Many animal species were falling ill. What was often dismissed as aging or unknown diseases was actually due to mana depletion. The clearest proof, she said, was the monoceros, a species that used to be lions. Our boy recalled that Sansa was originally a lion too, and though it looked as cute as a cat now, he wondered what its true form looked like. He pictured it grooming itself just the same, even as a lion. A thought struck our protagonist. He asked Pio what ailment commonly affected the guardians of flying fish. She remembered it was a condition that weakened the bones, leading to easy fractures. Ojin asked Selena about the commonly prescribed medicine. She named bloomflower root for bone healing, blood root for pain relief, and other supportive herbs. When he asked about side effects, Selena mentioned that blood root caused fatigue and numbed the nerves over time. Our hero immediately realized this was the problem and asked for a medicine to counteract those effects. Selena replied that such a medicine existed, but it negated the original effects. However, our boy still insisted on knowing how to make it. Selena gestured behind her, and our protagonist realized she meant the mandrake. As he approached, the mandrake frowned. Ojin explained that he just needed a few leaves, but the plant suddenly shrieked so loudly that everyone, Selena, Pio, and our hero, had to cover their ears. The mandrake started crying, much to his annoyance. Pio suggested that it probably felt neglected, since he'd been focusing only on Sansa lately. Our protagonist admitted that he felt awkward around plants. Pio advised him to at least give it a name. When he hesitated, the mandrake cried even louder. Helpless, he named it Kim Mandol. Instantly, the plant stopped crying and began to dance joyfully. Ojin took 2 leaves and thought to himself that the plants and animals in this world were alarmingly emotional. Selena watched quietly, then asked to see his necklace. She examined it, finding nothing unusual. When she put it on and tried to pet Sanja and Mandel, both reacted aggressively. Selena concluded that the necklace's bond only worked for Ojin. She asked how he activated its power, and he explained that focusing his thoughts created a tightening sensation in his chest, which then released energy. Selena realized that this power might be connected to his heart. Ojin added that now, touching the necklace drew creatures closer to him, as if they were expecting food. While feeding Sansa its favorite choro pastry, Selena noticed a glowing flow of energy, and deduced that our boy was unconsciously channeling his mana into the creatures. The thought alarmed her. Such a link could be very dangerous. Meanwhile, Pio announced that the crushed leaves were ready and had prepared a potion from them. She asked if she should bring another batch, and our hero agreed. Selena quietly watched him, lost in thought. Everything about Kim Ojin, the energy around him, the way life reacted to his presence seemed extraordinary. For the first time, she began to wonder if he truly was the spirit of healing the legends spoke of. At Luriel's mansion, she entered her father's room with medicine and found him lying on the floor. She rushed to help him up, quickly realizing he had tried to stand because Lumi wanted to be near the window. Despite his weakness, he insisted he was fine. Luriel worried that his fragile bones made such movements dangerous, but he just replied that his time was limited anyway. She protested, insisting his illness could still improve, but he believed that death came not just from illness, but from a loss of hope. Tears fell as she begged him to stop talking like that, but he refused. Just then Ojin arrived with Selena, Pio, and the rest of the group, interrupting the emotional scene. He boldly declared that people die not from disease or fate, but from misinformation, incorrect prescriptions, bad habits, and a lack of proper care. Both Luriel and her father were startled by the sudden appearance. Our protagonist introduced himself and explained that Lumi's inability to fly wasn't due to old age, but was a side effect of the medicines Chaco had been taking. The father was confused, insisting he was the one taking the medicine, not Lumi. Our hero clarified that flying fish retain their aquatic grooming instincts. They clean their food or individuals they care about. Lumi, by grooming her father's hair and beard, had absorbed the medicine's residue through contact. Luriel recalled Lumi spending many nights near Chaco, nuzzling against him. The old man realized the truth and mumbled that this explained why his beard always looked so glossy. Ojin confirmed this and presented the syringes containing the cure he had developed. He explained that the fish would regain its energy within a day or two. The father joked that he'd shave everything off to avoid a repeat of the problem. Our protagonist began the treatment, holding each fish while Pio kept them still so he could administer the injection. When finished, he noted it was a fast-acting medicine. A few moments later, Lumi began to stir and suddenly flew into the air, glowing faintly as it flew toward the father. He watched it, realizing this wasn't a dream. One by one, the other fish began to glow and take flight, their bodies emitting a soft blue light. The entire room filled with a shimmering glow as the school of fish circled overhead. Luriel and her father watched in awe. The sight, reminding her father of the day he proposed to her mother with fish, glowing and soaring into the sky just like this. Holding Lumi in his hands, he was overcome with emotion. Pio watched quietly, understanding this reaction came from contact with Ojin's blood and mana, and realized he was no ordinary man. Selena also came to the same conclusion, wondering if he really was the one spoken of in the prophecy, the healing spirit. Later, Selena met with Callian to discuss this. Callian believed everything fit the prophecy perfectly, and insisted Ojin's bond with the Monoceros was undeniable proof. Selina questioned his decision to give our protagonist a ring that didn't belong to him, but Callian insisted the original owner would approve. He admitted that rumors of the healing spirit would soon spread across the world, and they intended to use this to uncover the truth behind the hidden forces, rather than simply chasing enemies. Selina realized this was why Baron Dolly was released to lure out the masterminds, pulling the strings. Callian reassured her that Ojin would not be harmed, and pointed out that it was no coincidence she met him in this village. Selina recalled first seeing our hero when he subdued a giant rabbit in the village while wearing his mysterious necklace. Although she admitted he was unique, she still doubted he was the healing spirit. Callian told her to keep watching, reminding her that the prophecy wasn't just about salvation. It also warned of the trials that must come first. Another quiet morning arrived at Ojin's clinic. Inside, a blob-like creature called a bloop was once again huddled on a leaf. Although its care fees had been settled last week, our hero recognized it and grew irritated, wondering why it was still here. Meanwhile, Selina was tending to the creature, explaining she was watching one of 3 bloops. She handled it carelessly, prompting our protagonist to intervene. He recalled that bloops were divided into core types, which contained a core in their heads, and coreless types which multiplied easily. Containing a core type would prevent further division, but the one Selina was handling lacked a core and could reproduce when stressed. Selina confirmed it was a sensitive specimen that would multiply under pressure. Our boy grew uneasy, acutely aware of the danger of keeping such creatures. 3 bloops could reproduce uncontrollably and had wiped out entire villages when handled improperly. Keeping one in the clinic, along with volatile creatures like the Mandrake and Sansa, felt reckless. He silently questioned the decision, realizing Selina hadn't gotten the owner's permission, but had acted on her own under the guise of cooperation. Observing the exchange, Pio grew anxious, tactfully suggesting it might be better not to get involved. Our protagonist recalled hearing that elves who cover their ears often do so to hide a criminal's mark, branded as a punishment. The thought lingered in his mind. Selina's habit of acting first, her evasion of personal questions, and her aggressive temperament all raised doubts about her past. Ojin briefly considered firing her, but decided against it due to the clinic's heavy workload. Before he could think further, Selina signaled it was time to open, and the daily grind continued. Elsewhere at Baron Dolly's castle, the Baron was speaking through a crystal logramma with a mysterious figure. The man demanded to know why the Azuran Order had appeared at Ojin's clinic. The Baron explained they had barged in unexpectedly, mentioned a divine beast, interrupted his work, and then left. The man was furious, accusing the Baron of letting the Azuran Order steal the Monoceros. The Baron apologized and promised to retrieve it, but added that he didn't need to steal the beast, since it was already with Kim Ojin. The man was shocked, knowing that a Monoceros normally couldn't coexist with humans. The Baron insisted it had followed our protagonist willingly. The man ordered him to silence everyone who knew, calling him incompetent. The connection ended, leaving the Baron fuming after a lengthy scolding. He instructed his butler to summon Theodore and Alex, who were currently on vacation. The butler noted they were given leave after complaining about working overtime. The Baron, enraged, canceled their vacation and demanded they be brought back, realizing the problem was only getting worse. Meanwhile, at the market, rumors about the Azuran Order's arrival spread like wildfire. Villagers gossiped about having seen the group with their own eyes, wondering why such a powerful order would visit a rural clinic. Word spread that they had come for a rare divine beast. Some claimed our hero was no ordinary doctor, but someone from another world. Others recounted tales of him taming a mana-infused beast and domesticating a divine creature with his bare hands. The stories blended fact with fantasy, until the whole town was abuzz with speculation. As night fell, the rumors took on a new dimension. People began calling Ojin the healing spirit, a figure once believed to be female according to ancient prophecies. Now they said the spirit was a man, and whoever gained his favor would rule the world. A woman with long pink hair discussed the rumors with a brown-haired companion, remarking that the prophecies' meaning could change with this new interpretation. In the noble district of Manhwa, Adrian arrived at his clinic, expecting the usual hustle and bustle, only to find it silent. He commented on the emptiness and learned from his butler that no patients had arrived since morning. Suspecting Count Downey's interference, he vowed to retaliate. But his assistant gently reminded him that the drop in clients might be related to a new veterinary clinic in Belmo run by Ojin. Adrian dismissed the idea, reasoning that nobles would never visit a commoner's establishment. However, his composure wavered when he heard that Lady Marian had canceled her appointment to visit Ojin's clinic. The realization sent him into a rage. Slamming his hand on the desk, Adrian immediately ordered his carriage prepared, determined to confront the one who had caused him this humiliation. Adrian was born into nobility, possessing intelligence, talent, and striking looks, qualities that made his decision to become a veterinarian seem unusual to many. However, he had a simple reason. He genuinely adored people who doted on their pets. With practiced charm, he would often reassure worried owners that their beloved animals would recover, finding satisfaction in soothing their anxieties. Adrian always maintained a clear boundary between his personal and professional lives, except when it came to one woman, Lady Marian Astrid. From the moment she walked into his clinic, his heart had chosen her. He often believed he had become a veterinarian, just to treat her unicorn. That belief turned to bitterness when he learned Lady Marian had chosen someone else, a commoner, to treat Lulu, her unicorn. Furious, he ordered his clinic closed for the day, and immediately set off for the Astrid residence. At the mansion, Marian's mother received him politely, but with a clear air of indifference, questioning his unannounced visit. Adrian expressed concern for Lulu, describing unicorns as sensitive creatures, and implying that entrusting it to a random commoner was irresponsible. Her mother corrected him. Kim Oh-jin, the new veterinarian, was actually a woman. This revelation took him by surprise. She added that despite being a commoner, our hero was said to be incredibly talented and beautiful, so much so that people called her a fairy or a spirit. The thought flustered Adrian. He began to imagine what kind of woman could be compared to a fairy, perhaps a blonde-haired angel or a mysterious dark beauty. His fantasies were cut short when Marian's mother admitted she'd made up the story to test his reaction and promptly ordered the servants to show him out. Humiliated but defiant, Adrian insisted he wasn't obsessed with women, only devoted to Lady Marian. His declaration only amused her mother, who had him escorted out. Sitting in his carriage, Adrian fumed over the humiliation and resolved to meet Kim Oh-jin himself. He prided himself on understanding unicorns better than most, knowing they judged people by scent, hated the smell of blood and sweat, and could be violent toward men. Unicorns loved cleanliness and fragrant perfumes, and he believed his meticulous grooming made him uniquely suited to approach them. He recalled his own trials in gaining a unicorn's trust and the strategy of bathing twice a day and using the same perfume as their owner, which had worked wonders. He was certain that a smelly commoner, who knew nothing of perfume, would surely infuriate Lulu, giving him the perfect opportunity to heroically intervene in front of Marian. The thought made him blush and chuckle to himself, while his coachman silently pitied his delusions. When Adrian's carriage arrived in Belmo, he found a crowd gathered outside the clinic, murmuring with excitement at the sight of a unicorn. Confident that our protagonist was about to make a fool of himself, Adrian prepared to enjoy the show. That confidence shattered when he saw our hero calmly sitting on the back of Lulu, the unicorn, completely at ease. The crowd was astonished, and Marian herself admitted she had never seen Lulu allow anyone else to ride it. Adrian stood frozen, unable to believe the sight. He convinced himself there had to be a trick involved, perhaps magic from the elven woman standing next to Oh-jin. His suspicion shattered when Lulu suddenly bit the elven woman's hand, leaving her stunned and silent. Oh-jin immediately tended to the wound and dispersed the crowd, while whispers spread among the onlookers. Determined not to retreat in humiliation, Adrian decided to follow them. He spotted an open window and began to climb a nearby tree, recalling his academy days as the champion tree climber. From the window, he saw our guide treating the elven woman's bite calmly, applying herbs and bandaging it with an unfamiliar technique. Adrian's eyes narrowed at the strange crest, glowing faintly on Oh-jin's hand. He was shocked when he recognized it. The symbol of the Celestin clan, the noblest of all elven families. He stared in disbelief, realizing that the so-called commoner Veterinarian bore the mark of the most noble elven lineage. Oh-jin noticed a faint mark on Selina's hand while bandaging it and quickly realized that the wound he thought was minor actually contained venom from the creature's saliva. He remarked that they were lucky it wasn't more potent. Selina reflected on the creature's earlier reaction, noting that it had shown unusual hostility, a rare trait for its species. Marian apologized for the incident and insisted on covering the medical expenses, but our hero refused, admitting it was due to their own carelessness. When Marian pointed towards Selina and asked if she worked at the clinic, Oh-jin explained that she was an assistant doctor who handled prescriptions and manual tasks in the clinic. Marian acknowledged the arrangement, then remarked that despite Oh-jin's reputation, the clinic seemed quite small for someone with his skills. The comment brought our protagonist back to memories of his previous workplace, a cramped, noisy building with a clogged toilet, a broken heater, and constant complaints about animals. Before he could finish his thought, Marian interrupted, expressing sympathy for his past struggles and admiration for his achievements. Her voice softened into praise, flustering him as she complimented him and subtly suggested that her family could finance a larger clinic, leaving our guy unsure if she was proposing business or something else entirely. Before the tension could settle, Lulu suddenly attacked Sanra, sending the room into chaos. Both Marion and our protagonist rushed to stop them. As Selena remarked that unicorns, despite being like monoceros, usually get along with smaller creatures, Marion bristled at the implication that Lulu's temperament was the cause, and the conversation quickly escalated between her and Selena. Accusations about manners, bribed appointments, and noble entitlement filled the air. Pio muttered that nobles really do think differently, and earned a glare from Marion. As the air grew tense, Lulu thrashed wildly, crashing into a bookshelf and knocking it over. Suddenly there was a loud crash. The window shattered and Adrian came tumbling through, landing face down on the floor. Everyone froze as Selena stopped the bookshelf from falling in mid-air, saving it from collapsing. The group stared in disbelief, unsure if the intruder was even alive. Adrian lifted his head, bloody but still smiling, and spoke to Marion with exaggerated relief, while Marion stammered in shock. Pio demanded to know who he was. Adrian grandly introduced himself as Adrian Heaven Crow, kissing Pio's hand and declaring his devotion to protecting all beautiful lives. Ojin stared at him, inwardly horrified by the dramatic entrance and pompous tone, comparing Adrian to an over-the-top influencer. When asked why he came through the window, Adrian replied indignantly, claiming he was Lulu's primary doctor, and accusing our protagonist of mistreating it. The accusation quickly turned into an argument. Ojin insisted Lulu was fine, while Adrian called him an unqualified fraud, and even labeled him a promiscuous bastard. Confused, Ojin turned to Selena for an explanation, and she clarified that it was an insult for a deceitful womanizer who lures others in like a carnivorous plant. Our hero's delayed realization only added to his skepticism. Marion intervened, scolding Adrian for his vulgarity, but Adrian continued to question Ojin about his romantic history. In the midst of the confrontation, Adrian noticed a mark on Ojin's hand and accused him of being connected to a noble lineage or something even more scandalous. But Pio blurted out that it must be an engagement ring, causing everyone to look at our guy with stunned confusion. He explained that the memento was a gift from someone named Callion, but his explanation only added to the confusion. Before anyone could ask more, Lulu began to tremble violently, sweat breaking out on its skin. A few moments later, it collapsed and everyone rushed to its side. Ojin quickly examined it. Its pupils reacted normally, and though its breathing was heavy, it wasn't critical. He called for Pio to bring a candle and a stethoscope, piecing together the cause. Adrian observed, then solemnly announced his conclusion. Lulu wasn't sick. She was pregnant. Adrian examined Lulu and concluded that she was pregnant. Marion was initially incredulous, finding his diagnosis hard to accept, convinced that the unicorn's isolation in the castle's greenhouse made pregnancy impossible. Selena supported Adrian's suspicion, noting that Lulu's recent behavioral changes, especially her heightened alertness, were consistent with early signs of pregnancy. When Adrian introduced a medical device for detecting internal sounds, Marion followed his instructions and used the tool. She identified Lulu's heartbeat, then another, smaller and distinct, emanating from within her belly. Overwhelmed by the truth, she collapsed and Adrian caught her. Meanwhile, our protagonist calmly explained that the device was called a stethoscope. Adrian was amazed by its accuracy, impressed by how clearly it conveyed even the slightest internal sounds. Working together, Adrian and Ojin determined that Lulu was about 4 months pregnant. Marion again dismissed the idea, insisting that Lulu hadn't left the greenhouse during that time. Her claim only deepened the mystery, as the unicorn had been isolated to prepare for an arranged mating with the prince's prized steed. Despite these precautions, the evidence of pregnancy was undeniable. Lulu was moved to an intensive care room, where Ojin administered IV fluids and electrolytes to combat dehydration and malnutrition from prolonged vomiting. The others watched with fascination, noting the directness of a treatment that bypassed the digestive system entirely. A heavy silence fell as Marion tried to process the situation. Selena broke the silence, reasoning that the arranged meeting with the prince's horse had likely failed, because unicorns rarely choose a mate, and often live solitary lives, unless they meet one who is truly worthy. But on rare occasions, a special pair would produce a legendary hybrid with a golden body. Adrian suggested sending Lulu to the palace as a royal gift to explain the situation directly to His Highness, believing the prince would welcome such a rare creature. Selena dismissed the idea as unreliable, reminding them that tales of hybrid unicorns were mostly myth and no one knew who the baby's father was. Adrian pointed out the many elite horses raised under Lady Marion's care, any of which could be a candidate. Siegfried was admired for his speed and beauty, Tara was prized for her stamina, Dolly was known for her grace, and Black Thunder was famous for his strength. Marion admitted that identifying the true mate was essential before any decisions could be made. When Adrian volunteered to help, Marion appealed to Ojin instead, hoping his medical expertise could uncover the truth. He declined, reminding her that a stethoscope couldn't determine paternity. Adrian intervened, acknowledging that Ojin's instincts and care for Lulu made him more suitable than anyone else to help. Selena added that the answer might already be close. As pregnant, unicorns often show distress when separated from their mates, but Lulu had remained calm throughout the journey. Retracing the timeline, Marion realized that Lulu's agitation only began after arriving at their destination. The carriage route provided the first clue. At the stables, Joseph was tending to a lion horse, unaware of the tension building around him. When Lulu spotted the young horse, she became visibly emotional, rushing towards it and nuzzling it with clear recognition. The onlookers were stunned. Marion was horrified, unable to comprehend why a unicorn of royal status would bond with a common crossbreed horse. The absurdity of the scene led our hero to quietly remark, comparing it to a drama where aristocratic parents reject a forbidden love. Adrian observed Lulu's behavior, affirming that despite all expectations, the bond between the two animals was real. Marion protested that the horse was too young, but Ojin pointed out that Lulu's choice was clear, and separating them would only harm both her and the fetus. The evidence left Marion speechless, her thoughts reeling from the unbelievable reality. Before her, a unicorn, a symbol of purity and grace, was bound by affection to a common, stable horse. After discovering the truth about Lulu and the horse, Marion's father confronted Joseph. He told the young man that allowing a lowly carriage horse near a precious unicorn was utter madness. Joseph tried to explain that he had no idea, but the Count accused him of lying and trying to profit from the situation. Despite Joseph's denials, the Count refused to listen and ordered both him and the horse to be locked up, announcing that a punishment would be decided soon. The maids whispered among themselves, agreeing that the Count was being too cruel. Joseph had done nothing wrong. They pointed out that no one could stop animals from showing affection for each other. The conversation turned to why Lulu was supposed to be sent to the royal palace. Some realized she was likely being used as a bribe for the crown princess selection at the end of the year, to Marion's participation, and that Lulu could have been living in royal luxury if things had gone according to plan, but instead she ended up with a carriage horse. One remarked that Lulu was probably just like her owner. Another hinted that there was more to Lady Marion than people knew. Suddenly, a maid warned the others to be quiet. Just then another maid rushed in, with news that Lulu's condition had worsened. She had started coughing up blood. Marion immediately rushed to Lulu's side and asked what was wrong. The maid explained that Lulu had been unable to eat due to morning sickness and was now vomiting blood. She recalled Selena's warning that pregnant unicorns become extremely anxious when separated from their mates, and Lulu's health had deteriorated because of it. The maid warned that if this continued, the situation could get much worse. Marion asked when Ojin would arrive, and the maid replied that a message had been sent in the morning, but he was delayed by the distance. Determined, Marion decided to find another doctor nearby and ordered the horse to be brought to Lulu. The man leading the horse urged it to go faster, while the maids complained about the smell. They said being locked up was no excuse, and it should have been washed clean before meeting the lady. The man insisted it was an emergency. Marion signaled for them to be quiet and instructed them to bring the horse inside. The moment Lulu saw it, she immediately ran to it and snuggled close. Marion ordered warm water to be brought, saying she would wash it herself. The maids were shocked, but she ignored their protests, and also instructed them to prepare gruel for Lulu. She began to wipe down the horse with a warm, wet towel, thinking it was a heartless animal, but couldn't forget how her own parents had once opposed her relationship with a merchant's son. She reflected that Lulu could have lived in luxury, but wondered if this simple happiness was what Lulu truly wanted. Just then our protagonist arrived. He treated Lulu and explained that, while animals might have their own preferences, there is no hierarchy among them. Lulu didn't consider herself nobler than a horse. The next morning, he administered an IV to Lulu and reassured Marion that just being with the one she loved was enough for her happiness. While giving medicine, he noted that this would help for now, but it was only a temporary solution. The real solution was to allow Lulu and her mate to be together. Marion quietly agreed. Our hero prepared to leave, mentioning that he had to return to his clinic, where many patients were waiting and his assistant doctor was still there, though he secretly doubted her empathy. Marion assured him she understood, saying she would leave the follow-up care to him. As Marion and Ojin watched, Adrian clung awkwardly to the tree, clearly struggling to climb down. He finally made it down, apologizing for his impoliteness, but our hero corrected him, calling it a crime. Adrian insisted he had only climbed the tree out of concern for Lulu and intended to leave. After checking on her, Marion reminded him he should have notified the staff. but Adrian explained he had tried and was denied entry. Noticing the device in Adrian's pocket, Ojin recognized it as a stethoscope and casually commented on how cheap it felt. Adrian, embarrassed, admitted it was still a prototype. Our protagonist advised that a doctor should have proper tools and then prepared to leave. Mentioning his busy patient schedule, Adrian watched him go, thinking Ojin was a better person than he had thought, while our guy thought the opposite, confirming to himself that Adrian was a strange person. That evening, Lulu started eating on her own and regained some of her strength, bringing relief to Marion. Adrian told her that love and care were the best medicine and praised her for personally tending to Lulu. Marion reflected that her stubbornness had caused Lulu's suffering and admitted she should have reunited them sooner. Realizing she had perhaps been envious of her unicorn, she recalled being as innocent as Lulu once, but over time had grown accustomed to judging others by their status and wealth. Adrian remarked that all nobles were like that, but Marion thought back to her first love, remembering she had never cared about status, only the beauty in his eyes. She had given him up for both their happiness and now wondered aloud if she was truly happy. Adrian replied that first loves always end in heartbreak, and that pain can blind a person to the love that is already near them. He suggested that her true soulmate might already be very close. Marion felt confused, realizing too late what she had overlooked, and decided to withdraw from the princess selection. As Adrian listened, he secretly pulled a small box from his pocket, feeling a rare opportunity forming in his heart. He placed it before Marion and began to speak, but suddenly she declared that she was going to pursue Ojin. Adrian froze, unsure if he had misheard, and asked again in disbelief. Marion continued, saying she would rather seize power for herself than marry someone who already had it, leaving Adrian stunned. She ended the conversation by thanking him and saying she hoped they could still be good friends. Adrian felt crushed by her words and vowed never to forgive Ojin. Back at the clinic, Pio sneezed and continued reading a paper, informing Ojin that Kyo was being accepted as Lulu's companion and requesting him to become Lulu's private doctor. The offer included a payment 10 times the usual amount, but our protagonist refused, explaining he couldn't leave his hospital due to a busy schedule. Pio complained that the tartar wasn't coming off, even after an hour. Ojin checked the snake whose teeth were being cleaned, found the tartar buildup, and instructed Pio to spray saline solution and prepare anti-inflammatory medicine and cotton swabs. While working, he discovered something stuck between its teeth and pulled out a small object. The pet's owner was overjoyed, revealing that the creature, Samya, was a divine beast, once gifted to their family by the previous king, and it had just swallowed their family heirloom. Our protagonist noted that there was still some tartar left, and a few teeth might need to be extracted, estimating it would take another hour or two of work. Selena commented that it might take up to 5 hours, as the beast had another head. Overwhelmed, our protagonist despaired, while the owner tried to encourage him, presenting a painting of himself and Samir. The owner explained it was created by their family's official portrait painter, and asked Ojin if he liked it. He found the painting ugly and wanted to refuse, but the artist insisted that he would finish and present it soon, saying it had been a long time since he had found a subject so inspiring. As he spoke, Samir's eyes opened and Selena noticed immediately. Ojin tensed, wondering if the sedative dose was sufficient. Selena raised her hand to cast a protective spell, but Adrian suddenly stepped in front of her, and the spell hit him instead of the beast. Selena recognized him as the noble doctor and wondered why he had appeared so suddenly. Before anyone could react, Samir opened its mouth, swallowed Adrian in one gulp, and everyone in the room stood frozen, shocked that the beast had just swallowed a man whole. The clinic was closed for the day, but a crowd had been waiting outside since dawn. People complained about traveling from afar after hearing about the doctor's skill, while others discussed trying the hospital in the next village. Observing from a distance, Adrian felt his anger rising. He couldn't forgive Ojin for making a woman cry while calling himself a healing spirit. He recalled a conversation with his assistant. When asked about the healing spirit, the assistant had described it as a legendary being, capable of granting the power to rule the world. But Adrian had scoffed at the idea, thinking Lady Marion was foolish to be swayed by such words, and believing he himself looked more like a spirit than Ojin did. However, his mind drifted to his assistant's words about Ojin's miracles, healing a flying fish, turning a demon apostle into a cat. The stethoscope hanging around Adrian's neck, a gift from our protagonist, felt heavier as he remembered being asked if he still cherished it. He had feigned indifference, saying he would return it, and asking if there were copies. The assistant had confirmed there were. Now hiding in a tree with binoculars, Adrian mused that he had only come to return the tool, wondering why he was here again. Below, our protagonist was treating a hydra. Its 2 heads moved weakly as he scraped tartar, rinsed its mouth with water, and applied medicine to prevent inflammation. Watching closely, Adrian felt a grudging admiration, realizing that our guy's medical skills far surpassed his own, even though he had been the top student at the Royal Academy. Suddenly, the Hydra's tail twitched. It was starting to wake from the sedative. Adrian realized it too late, as the creature lunged towards Selena. He ran to save her, and the Hydra swallowed him in one gulp. A wave of shock went through the crowd. Ojin was stunned for a moment, watching the Hydra's owner scream in panic. Selena quickly assessed that Adrian had been swallowed whole and prepared to use magic, but our protagonist stopped her, noticing the Hydra's tongue had turned purple, and its breathing was blocked. It had swallowed something too big. Relying on a method they had practiced, Ojin and Selena acted immediately. On his signal, Selena struck the Hydra hard, forcing it to perform the Heimlich maneuver. The creature writhed, and with another powerful blow, Adrian was ejected, falling to the ground. The Hydra's breathing stabilized, and relief spread among the owners. They praised the protagonist's medical skills. Our protagonist instructed Selena to check on Adrian's condition. She confirmed that he was alive, but would be unconscious for a while, due to the spell used on the Hydra Gemini. Ojin silently noted that Samir's condition had also stabilized, although the earlier shock had caused a bruise on its stomach. Selena applied an ointment and finished the bandaging. That evening, our guy instructed the Hydra's owners to be more careful, reminding them that any accident where a pet swallows something is the owner's responsibility. They promised to be careful, even joking that they would make sure it never swallowed a person again. A few days later, the Baron sent a painting titled The Great Rescue as a gift. Our protagonist found it bizarre, only to learn that a statue of him saving Adrian from Samir's mouth had also been made. He felt the world had gone mad. Meanwhile, Adrian was still asleep, oblivious, while Pio and Selena watched over him, waiting for him to wake up. Adrian woke up confused about where he was and what had happened. But the memories started to piece together. He had been watching Ojin's clinic, saw the snake wake up, and had jumped in to save Selena. The next thing he remembered was being swallowed. But in the darkness, he thought grimly, that it was a fitting end for a vegetarian. If there was a next life, perhaps he'd be reborn as a unicorn, with a beautiful heroine. Suddenly, a pain shot through his body. He wondered if this was what it felt like before being born, silently praying for it to stop. He coughed, and the sound pulled him back to reality. Selena stood beside him, remarking that he was awake. Adrian, still dizzy, wondered if she was his master. She told him not to get up just yet. The side effects of the magic would make him dizzy and nauseous, so he should rest for 2 or 3 days. Adrian quietly agreed. Our protagonist entered with a steaming cup, telling him to sit up for a moment. He explained it was recovery medicine, and insisted that Adrian drink it all. Adrian complied, while Ojin mentioned that he had even added a few of Mandol's leaves to the medicine. He also informed Adrian that the Astrid Mansion had been contacted, and that he could rest here for a few more days. Adrian protested, not wanting to be a bother, but our protagonist reminded him that as a doctor, he should know health comes first. Adrian thanked him, and our guy said he would step out so Adrian could rest. As Ojin left, Adrian watched him go, and found himself thinking that our protagonist was truly a wonderful person. Ashamed of his previous jealousy, Adrian decided that one day he wanted to be more like him, until he spotted a letter on the bedside table. A bill. Lodging fee 500 silver. Meal fee 100 silver. Grand total 686 silver. Adrian stared at it and silently cursed Ojin. And meanwhile at the clinic, a couple stood with their cat, worried that their pet's gender might be changed. Our protagonist explained it was just a figure of speech. The cat would be neutered. The couple protested, arguing it was cruel. Our protagonist patiently reminded them that the cat's energy had declined. Caring for kittens is hard, and the female's health was suffering from having too many litters. He asked what solution they would propose. The owner protested that the cat was still young. Ojin asked if they wanted to calculate how many more kittens there would be in the next 5 years, or if they were secretly selling the Fennec Fox kits. The owner denied it, but argued that if the surgery happened, what joy would the cat have left? Used to these discussions, our protagonist explained that frequent mating causes rapid aging, shortens lifespans, and reduces the quality of life for both the pet and the owner. The couple left with teary eyes. Pio reassured them that she would help schedule the surgery. After they left, our protagonist mumbled about having to make a schedule himself soon. He was tired of repeating the same advice every time. Pio told him that the next patient was her childhood friend's pet, and asked him to take good care of it. Ojin promised he would. A girl entered holding a large chicken, and said they were here for a checkup. Our protagonist noticed the chicken's glossy feathers, and remarked that it looked perfectly healthy. Pio added that Pop was the biggest and healthiest among her friend's pets. The girl nodded proudly. 20 minutes later, our protagonist finished examining Pop and concluded that the chicken was qualified to enter a fine poultry competition. The girl was still worried, saying Pop seemed to have gotten thinner lately, but Ojin determined it wasn't actual weight loss. The girl recalled a twitch while Pop was sleeping and worried it might be serious, but Ojin concluded it was likely just harmless restlessness. The girl added that Pop's throat was sore the other day, fearing an infection. Pio reassured her that this was normal. After a careful examination, Ojin found nothing abnormal, easing the girl's worries. A moment later, Pio rushed in frantic. Pop was gone. Tia explained that she had stopped by the restroom before heading home, and in that moment, Pop had disappeared. Ojin ordered all exits and windows sealed. Selena told everyone in the waiting area to stay put, as there was a lost animal. Several patients complained that their pets would get restless if confined for too long. Sansa calmed them down as their pets started acting up. The group searched everywhere but couldn't find Pop. Ojin asked if Pop had any particular likes or dislikes. Tia said she didn't know, but maybe Pop had left. He insisted that Pop couldn't have opened the door or jumped through a window on its own. It must still be inside. Pio remembered that Pop was very fond of men. Ojin noted that some animals prefer deeper voices. Tia said that Pop's obsession with men was extreme. Ojin had a realization. That's why Pop had been clinging to him during the examination. Sansa suggested there was only one place left, a room with a sleeping man. They rushed there and found Pop hugging Adrian tightly. Everyone was stunned into silence. Ojin looked at Tia and asked why she did it. Ojin questioned Tia about why she had intentionally left Pop behind. He had felt something was off from the start. Throughout his years as a doctor, he had met countless types of owners, but never a guardian who was disappointed to hear their pet was healthy. He pointed out that no matter how fast a chicken was, it was too visible and small to get lost, and too noticeable to slip through the doors and get here without being spotted. He demanded an explanation. Tia confessed she did it because the Baroness would never believe someone like her. But if a famous doctor like Ojin claimed Pop was sick and had gone missing, she would believe it. Ojin asked who could possibly believe such a story, and Tia replied, the Baroness. Her voice was filled with desperation as she begged Ojin for help. If she told the Baroness that Pop was healthy, it would be hunted. A hunting competition was coming up, hosted by the Baroness's house, along with a feast for an important guest, rumored to be Prince Theo himself. The Baroness was preparing for the event and planned to cook Pop for the feast. The room fell silent. Pio burst out in disbelief, wondering why anyone would want to eat someone else's pet, especially when the Baroness already owned several great fire chickens. Tia explained that those chickens had died last year from an infectious disease. Ojin remarked there must be other ingredients, but the Baroness insisted on Pop. Tia continued that great fire chickens are prized for their vitality and fertility. Creatures known for laying many eggs, families looking to strengthen their lineage often coveted them, believing that eating such a creature would boost vitality. Ojin bitterly remarked that people everywhere are obsessed with stealing others' talents through superstition. Tia said the Baroness had coveted Pop for a long time and now threatened to evict them from their farmland if they refused. Pio was furious, declaring that using someone's livelihood to steal a beloved pet was unforgivable. Tia pleaded again, begging Ojin to write a diagnosis, saying Pop had an infectious disease, assuring him that no one would dare touch the chicken then. Ojin refused. The room grew heavy with silence. He explained that the moment a doctor fakes a diagnosis, they are no longer a healer. They become a fraud who profits from life itself. Once that line is crossed, none of their treatments can be trusted. Adrian suddenly interjected, angrily accusing him of valuing his professional ethics over a life. To him, a doctor's duty was to save lives, not cling to rules. Ojin stood firm, reasoning that if he lied and declared Pop had a dangerous disease, the animal would be branded as infected. The farm could be sealed, and every creature there could be culled. If the truth was later exposed, the family could face punishment or be blamed for future disease outbreaks in the future. He said a doctor's purpose is to save lives, but never at the cost of endangering hundreds of lives to protect one. If someone can't understand that, they don't deserve to be a doctor. Tia bowed her head and quietly apologized. Outside the clinic, Tia sobbed. Pio tried to comfort her, insisting there had to be a solution. Tia despaired that she could never win against the nobility, and considered running away with Pop. Just then Ojin appeared. He told her there was no need to run away. Although he couldn't help as a doctor, he could assist as a fellow pet owner. Tia and Pio, relieved, looked up as he explained his plan. Ojin instructed Tia to spread a rumor in the Baroness's house and not to return. He called out the nearby eavesdroppers, ordering them to show themselves, especially Adrian, whom he assigned a crucial role. At the Clay family mansion, rumors were flying. Guests discussed how the daughter of Duke, Astrid Lady Marion, had withdrawn from the Crown Princess selection. Once considered a strong candidate, The Baroness listened with growing satisfaction, believing this was her daughter's chance to rise. She imagined the moment her daughter became the prince's choice, and saw it as revenge against every noble who had ever mocked them. The upcoming party, she thought, would be the perfect stage to secure her daughter's future. Her planning was interrupted when Adrian appeared at the entrance. The Baroness held her breath, startled by his presence and captivated by his striking looks. But as he approached with calm grace, he requested to speak with her privately at a table. The Baroness, taken aback, could only stare, wondering who this impossibly handsome stranger was. The Baroness sat beside Adrian, feeling as if she were in a dream, surrounded by admiring glances. She reveled in the moment, almost unable to believe she was conversing with such a handsome man at her own party. She asked if he had graduated from the Royal Academy, and when he confirmed, she eagerly asked if he had met the royal family. Adrian replied that he had, mentioning that he often saw Prince Theo as they attended during the same period. The Baroness made an immediate mental note, deciding she had to update her home's interior to keep up with the latest royal trends. Curious, she asked about the prince's eating habits. Adrian responded with gentle curiosity, wondering if she intended to serve the prince a meal or not. Embarrassed, she faltered, but he reassured her, saying he understood the challenge of preparing a dish for royalty. He offered to introduce her to a merchant of his acquaintance, a discreet trader, who catered only to the upper class and specialized in rare, high-quality imported ingredients. High quality. The Baroness, amazed and delighted, declared she wanted to meet this merchant immediately, seeing it as a stroke of unexpected luck. Later, Adrian escorted her to a small house, introducing it as the merchant's meeting place. The Baroness was disappointed by its humble appearance, but her thoughts were interrupted as two figures stepped forward and introduced themselves as Louis Vuitton and Chanel, none other than Selina and Ogin in disguise. Ogin greeted her warmly, and Selina remarked that she had come at just the right time. The Baroness was wary, suspecting they might be swindlers. Ogin presented a dessert, describing it as the latest craze among foreign nobility, a magical candy called tanghulu. The Baroness examined the glossy skewer of fruit and hesitantly took a bite. Instantly, her doubts vanished. The crisp sugar shell shattered with a satisfying crack, releasing a burst of sweet and sour fruit juice that flooded her senses. The sweet and tart flavors blended perfectly. She was overwhelmed by the taste and silently admitted to herself that these people were truly first-rate merchants. Once she was impressed, Ogin skillfully changed the subject, mentioning a rumor that she had recently acquired a rare ingredient, known as the immortal plant. The Baroness was startled, but our hero continued, describing it as the chickpea of eternal youth, an ingredient said to slow aging, improve health, and even prevent ailments like constipation and hair loss. Enthralled, the Baroness demanded to buy them all. But Ogin explained that every shipment was already reserved. But Adrian insisted that as an acquaintance, they should make an exception. Our guy hesitated, saying the reserved stock was a gift for the prince from another client. The Baroness panicked, asking if that client had a daughter of marriageable age. When our protagonist confirmed, she realized her rival's intention to win the prince's favor through this rare delicacy. In desperation, she offered to pay 10 times the price. Ogin pretended to be noble, refusing to sell for mere money, declaring that their trade was guided by the pursuit of truth, love, health, and peace. Selina stifled a sigh at his performance, while the Baroness felt ashamed for revealing her greed before such admirable people. Adrian intervened again, suggesting that compassion surely required selling to the person with the greater need. The Baroness looked at him, moved, while our hero reluctantly agreed to make an exception and sell the chickpeas. Before she left, Ogin warned her of one important precaution. He claimed these chickpeas contained the mana of the great fire rooster, the great ancestor god of all firefowls. Therefore, anyone who ate them must avoid all chicken-related foods for a while or suffer the reverse effects: rapid aging, sickness, constipation, and hair loss. Although none of this was true, the Baroness was horrified. The thought of not being able to eat chicken tormented her, but the fear of losing her youth was worse. She decided to keep the beans and abide by the ban. Adrian joked about older men, obsessed with vitality, and our protagonist played along, mocking the superstition. The Baroness, nervous, agreed to call the obsession with firefowls outdated. Later, back at the clinic, the plan had succeeded. Pop was safe. Tia beamed with relief and gratitude, thanking our hero for saving her companion. Ogin smiled, saying it was nothing, and gave her a custom-made carrier cage made with the money earned from Baroness Glaze. He explained that it would help prevent future risks. Tia, moved, called him her lifelong benefactor. Our protagonist laughed humbly, saying she could come to him anytime she needed help. Meanwhile, the mandrake sulked with jealousy as Pop enjoyed the attention. Ogin offered Tia a part-time job caring for the animals, and she eagerly accepted. Just as the mood turned cheerful again, Pop suddenly tried to swallow the mandrake, sending everyone into a panic. After subduing it and putting it in the cage, our protagonist reminded Tia not to bring Pop with her when she started work. Turning to Adrian, our hero gave him his payment for the cooperation. Adrian was surprised by the amount, but Ojin quickly explained that medical expenses, lodging and other fees had been deducted, leaving only 3 to 12 silver. Furious, Adrian grabbed our guy by the collar, calling him a scammer for overcharging. Selena interrupted, reminding Adrian that the treatment had been effective. Adrian immediately changed his tune, praising her skills and thanking her for the recovery he felt after taking the medicine she prescribed. Selena promised to write him another prescription to maintain his condition, and he accepted with a smile. After Adrian left, Selena asked if it was wise to let him go. Our protagonist admitted that Adrian's medical abilities were quite good, and that he worked well with her. However, he dismissed the idea of recruiting him for now. Selena remarked that his greed for money was at an all-time high, and predicted Ojin would soon regret this decision. Prince Theo sipped his tea, listening as talk of the upcoming hunting competition echoed through the room. Baron Dolly knelt in apology, explaining he had been looking for a chance to capture the Monoceros, but the hospital was never empty. But Theo scorned such half-measures and demanded a bolder plan. To proudly present Sansa, the Monoceros, before everyone and seize power with its help. He warned the Baron that failure would put him in a dangerous position. A sudden commotion interrupted the Baron's pet. Mama grew restless at mealtime and lunged for a plate of chickpeas brought by a servant. The wolf devoured them, enraging Theo, while the Baron bowed his head and swore to compensate, promising 10 times the value, as he frantically appeased the prince. Meanwhile, at Ojin's clinic, a post-surgery patient was recovering. The staff warned the owners that accidents could happen when animals woke up after anesthesia, and told them to keep a close watch. Tia returned with worries about Pop's sibling, Jeb, who was lethargic and coughing. Ojin examined Jeb, noting a mild cold with muscle weakness. He prescribed daily medication and urged careful care. When Tia returned the next day, she reported no improvement, and her dog had also fallen ill. Our protagonist realized the symptoms were the same across different species, and decided to hospitalize both animals to prevent further spread. Within days, the situation repeated. Animals from different households arrived with similar signs. Our hero realized this was more than a common cold, and urgently instructed pet owners to cover their noses and mouths, avoid touching objects with hands that had contacted sick animals, and to wear gloves. He separated symptomatic animals to the second floor and kept the others on the first. Despite the mild symptoms, medication brought no progress, and the illness was completely non-species specific. Selena warned that at this rate, the epidemic would soon be widespread. Her prediction came true. The clinic was packed, with desperate owners begging for care. Forced to turn some patients away, our protagonist witnessed that. Nearby hospitals were also overwhelmed. Lord Baron arrived in a panic about his house pet, Elizabeth, whom he insisted could not possibly be sick. A newly purchased turtle was revealed as the most likely carrier. The Baron asked about nearby empty properties, and an unused building in the back alley was offered as a temporary annex. Realizing the scale of the crisis, our hero accepted the loan and suddenly found himself alone, running a second facility, treating patients in 2 locations. He wondered how he could manage without another doctor. Over at Adrian's hospital, he noticed an empty ward and asked why there were so few patients. His assistant explained that the town was facing an infectious epidemic and predicted a call for support would come soon. A letter from Ojin arrived requesting aid, bringing along spare medicine and equipment, with a blunt offer of 2 gold per hour and a possible performance bonus. Adrian initially bristled at the tone, intending to burn the arrogant letter. But then he saw a line mentioning Selena collapsing from overwork. Conscience won over pride. Adrian announced he would be leaving until the battle against the pandemic, concluding, reasoning that a doctor's place is wherever there's a disaster. His assistants fell silent, realizing the gravity of the decision. As the first epidemic swept across the land, he urged Pio to gather everyone inside the clinic and announce strict quarantine measures. Any animal showing symptoms had to be isolated, and unnecessary trips outside were to be avoided. Questions arose about when each patient started. Coughing and records quickly piled up. Adrian continued to examine the patients. After 12 hours of non-stop work, he noted swollen throats, but in some cases, ruled out the possibility of the epidemic. Selena buried herself in 26 hours of drug testing, while our protagonist cared for a frail rabbit. After 18 hours of continuous treatment, he gently finished his examination, as exhaustion weighed heavily on the entire staff. To top it all off, Max reported that there were 2 more cases among the hunting dogs, scheduled to participate in the upcoming competition. The boarding area was overflowing, and Pio informed our guy that there was no more room. However, Ojin insisted on finding a spot and continued to search for a cure, reassuring everyone they would do their best. So I thanked him, while Adrian asked why they kept taking in patients beyond their capacity. Our hero answered, with his actions, unwilling to turn anyone away. Pio reported that some guardians were requesting to discharge their pets, thinking a light cough was harmless. Ojin dismissed the idea, explaining that neglect could lead to irreversible damage, especially for working animals like hunting dogs. They would be abandoned if they lost their value. He firmly believed that all animals deserved equal care, regardless of their utility. Late into the night, our protagonist tested antibiotics infused with dragon power, but all attempts failed. Meanwhile, Selena warned him to stop before the overuse of dragon energy strained his heart. He blamed the instability of mana and even considered learning alternative medicine. Selena pointed out that he hadn't slept in 3 days before knocking him unconscious to force him to rest. 5 hours later, Ojin woke up groggily and was fed fresh food by Pio. He realized the egg was from Pop, a healthy chicken that hadn't contracted the disease. Pio mentioned that both Pop and Sansa were fine, despite being exposed to the pathogen. Diet blood-type spirit? Until his gaze landed on Sansa, who was being drooled on by the mandrake, just like the mandrake had drooled on Pop. That's why Sansa and Pop weren't infected. Using a sample of the mandrake's saliva, mixed with a sample from an infected animal, Ojin watched the experimental leaf turn from gray to green, confirming a cure had been found. The clinic erupted in relief, as our protagonist and the team praised the mandrake for saving countless lives. Now came the problem of mass production. The group debated methods of pressing and diluting, but Selena had already prepared a sweet nutritional drink mixed with a diuretic. The mandrake eagerly lapped it up, saliva dripping from its leaves. Ojin was amazed, as they could now collect the essence and begin synthesizing the medicine that quickly. By morning, the epidemic had subsided. Max's cough was gone and his strength had returned. Our guy felt a deep sense of relief as he administered the final doses of the vaccine. Just as he finished writing the last prescription, a heavy knock echoed at the clinic. A voice from outside announced the Baron had arrived and demanded our hero's arrest. The Baron arrived at the clinic with his men, drawing a confused crowd that buzzed with whispers about the scene. Ojin calmly opened the door, meeting the Baron's gaze, as the nobleman declared his arrest for spreading the animal plague and profiting from treatment fees. Our hero's expression hardened, recalling the lie he had once spun to protect Sansa. He pointed to Sansa's fading M-shaped scar as proof of his success, realizing the accusation was just a pretext. The Baron's real goal was to seize Sansa. Pio stepped forward to defend Ojin's innocence, but the Baron angrily dismissed her words. Our protagonist ended the argument, agreeing to go quietly, but insisted on sedating Sansa first. The Baron hesitated, then conceded. But Ojin quietly signaled to Selena, preparing for a magical escape. Selena misunderstood, preparing to attack instead. As Sansa was sedated and placed in a cage, a faint light flashed from our protagonist's ring finger. It was the signal. Selena acted not with magic, but with a surprise punch that sent one of the Baron's men to the ground. He grabbed Sansa and fled into the crowd. The Baron ordered his men to give chase, prioritizing the cat over Ojin. Our hero realized their intentions, confirming his suspicions. The Baron grabbed Ojin by the collar, threatening to destroy everything. But Pio stepped in, refusing to let the clinic be harmed. As Adrian moved to shield Pio, it forced the Baron to back down, under the gaze of the onlookers. The guards led Ojin away. Our guy entrusted this clinic to Pio and Adrian, hoping Selena could keep Sansa safe. Rumors quickly spread through the city that Ojin, once the hero who fought the Monokoros, was the cause of the epidemic. The Baron announced a public trial, drawing attention from all over. In his prison cell, our protagonist got a moment of rest, after days of exhaustion, until the Baron and his pack of wolves arrived. The Baron demanded to know the location of the cat and the elf woman, but Ojin remained silent, inwardly relieved to know Selena and Sansa had escaped. The Baron threatened violence, gesturing toward his snarling pack. Our hero observed the trembling mama. Its stance was unsteady, and it showed clear signs of pain. He briefly examined the wolf, noting blood in its urine and lethargy. The diagnosis pointed to a severe hernia, left untreated for too long. Ojin concluded that surgery was needed, immediately to save the animal's life. Outside the mansion, Selena hid with Sansa, who was growing increasingly restless. Selena gripped her hand, whispering reassurances, with a quiet determination that our hero was still safe and sound. Ojin diagnosed Mama with a hernia, and immediately ordered the wolf moved to a clean room for emergency surgery. He directed the preparation of tools, medicine, and anesthesia, maintaining a calm, authoritative demeanor as the surgery began. Once the anesthetic took effect and the area was sterilized, our hero began the incision with steady precision. The Baron stood nearby watching anxiously, while a servant handed him a protective apron and gloves to minimize the risk of infection. Throughout the operation, our protagonist maintained tight control, requesting temperature checks, timing the next dose of anesthesia, and insisting on proper sterilization of each instrument. The Baron grew tense, unsure whether to trust Ojin's judgment. Outside the room, he remained skeptical of the diagnosis, until a memory surfaced. Mama's mother had died with the same symptoms. Staring at her portrait, he realized the mother wolf had also suffered from the same condition. Meanwhile, at the Baron's office, petitions demanding the release of Ojin began to pile up. Among them was a letter from the family of Lady Marian, Astrid threatening to report the Baron's false accusations to the king unless our protagonist was released. The servants voiced their outrage, worried about the growing backlash. The surgery ended successfully. The Baron rushed to see his companion breathing steadily, as Ojin calmly explained the treatment plan, a week of medication, and a future appointment to remove the stitches. Finally, exhaustion caught up with our hero, and he collapsed onto a nearby sofa, falling asleep. After days of relentless work, the Baron noticed the red marks left by the handcuffs on Ojin's wrists, and quietly instructed that they no longer be used. Back in his cell, our protagonist drifted into a dream. He found himself surrounded by the warmth of family. His parents' voices echoed faintly. His mother worried that his clinic must be struggling again, while his father lamented his stubbornness, recalling how Ojin had turned down medical school to become a veterinarian. He asked what was so noble about caring for animals. Our hero, in his dream, felt only peace. An animal appeared pressing close to him, a hybrid creature part cat, part lion, warm and comforting. Elsewhere, Theo questioned the Baron about the missing Monoceros. The Baron reported it had been taken by the Ezran Guild, revealing Selena was one of their agents. Reports confirmed her involvement with suspicious elf groups. Theo's anger erupted, condemning the Baron's incompetence. The Baron apologized and hesitantly asked if Ojin should be released now, mentioning the growing complaints from both nobles and commoners. Theo, weary of the issue, allowed him to decide. At the mansion, our hero was set free. Before leaving, he instructed the servants to bring Mama back in 3 days for stitch removal and gave them a list of precautions. A servant mentioned another patient, a hunting dog with a sore knee joint, and our protagonist agreed to check on it soon. Stepping outside, Ojin found his friends waiting at the gate. Shock and relief washed over him as they revealed they had been preparing to storm the castle if his release had been delayed any longer. He thanked them, and moments later Sansa, Mandrake, and Pop rushed over, hugging him in joyous reunion. Selena stood nearby, safe and smiling. Hugging Sansa tightly, our hero remembered his dream and the figure so much like her. He reaffirmed his belief that becoming a veterinarian was the right choice. From a window inside the mansion, the Baron watched silently. His servant anxiously asked if they were really letting Ojin go. The Baron's gaze lingered on the scene as the servant insisted that something strange had happened in the prison cell. The Monoceros had been seen licking the doctor's face before it vanished. The Baron dismissed the claim, though inwardly his thoughts revealed a deep uncertainty, declaring Ojin the winner of their conflict. A few days later, a sealed envelope was delivered to the Baron's desk. It was the surgery bill, itemized from our hero. Reading it, the Baron gripped the paper until his knuckles were white, vowing never to forgive him. In the morning, Adrian arrived at the clinic, greeting Selena as he gave her the herbs she had requested earlier. Ojin watched from a distance, wondering why Adrian was back again. Selena inspected the bundle of herbs, surprised that such rare herbs were found, out of season. Adrian confidently declared that nothing was beyond his reach. She handed him another list, which he eagerly took. As Selena examined the supplies, Adrian commented on their excellent quality, specifically praising a branch of spincha, only to find it had vanished from his hand. The culprit was Blue Ba, the tiny blob creature now munching on the herb. Adrian scolded it and reached out to take the plant back, but Blue Ba bit his finger split into 3 and slapped his face. With a glare, Adrian muttered that creatures really are like their owners, and every animal raised by our hero had a bad personality. Selena corrected him, stating Blue Ba was hers. This led Adrian to remark that it was no wonder it had such a fine taste in herbs. Blue Ba smirked mischievously, and Adrian froze, realizing the creature had just laughed at him. Selena placed Blue Ba in its cage to curb its antics. Inside the clinic, Blue Ba, also known as Ping Ping, was no ordinary blob. It proudly recounted its reign of dominance, claiming the second-floor herb room as its territory. But among the hundreds of animals that passed through daily, only 2 creatures truly held power: itself and Kim Sansa, Ojin's right hand and the hospital's enforcer. Though Sansa possessed unparalleled physical strength, she dared not provoke it. inside Ping. Ping's forehead was a visual core capable of duplicating its body infinitely, unleashing havoc on those who angered it. When they first met, Sansa had sensed its danger and attacked, but Ping had displayed its power, crushing any resistance. Since then, it had lived comfortably under Selena's protection, ruling the clinic alongside Sansa. Later that day, an owner burst into the clinic with a pet, motionless after being hit by a carriage, begging for help. Ojin examined the small body, found the airway was clear, and ordered chest compressions. He performed CPR systematically, ignoring the owner's skepticism. Moments later, the animal coughed and began to breathe again. Amazement turned to awe, as the owners declared it a miracle, while Ping watched from its cage, admiring our hero's ability to revive the dead. Ojin asked for a leaf from Mando, but Ping with disdain recalled Mando's low status as Sansa's henchman and mocked its pathetic dance. Mando glared back, which only made Ping taunt it more, amused by the lack of response. Night fell, and Ping continued its self-training regimen, running on its wheel, until it split into 3 copies, causing chaos around the clinic. It admired its fortressy, cozy space gifted by our protagonist, as a sign of loyalty, perfectly placed for temperature and humidity. Its satisfaction turned to rage when it found its fortress damaged, beyond recognition. It immediately suspected Mando, who was smirking from a distance. Rage boiled over as Ping accused it of challenging him. Mando, strengthened by its recent herbal enhancements, stood its ground. Ping mocked it for daring to challenge its superior, then lunged to attack. Mando dodged and Ping stumbled backward. Sizing up its opponent, Ping noted the improvement in Mando's body and stamina, but reminded it that without a pot, it was nothing, just a plant waiting to wither. With a swift strike, Ping shattered Mando's pot, sending it crashing to the floor in despair. Asserting its dominance, Ping demanded it kneel. Mando looked up a mix of despair and rage, preparing its secret weapon, an ultrasonic scream capable of rupturing eardrums. Ping sensed the danger, tried to cover its ears, and realized its tiny arms couldn't reach. The attack failed, producing only a weak, vibrating sound. Ping mocked Mando's silence, satisfied by its rival's downfall. A moment later, our hero entered, drawn by the noise. He surveyed the mess, and Mando collapsed with its broken pot, instantly understanding what had happened. Kneeling beside the crying plant, he gently soothed it, assuring it that it would be okay. Picking up the pieces of the pot, Ojin smiled gently and decided it was time to repot Mando once again. After receiving a massive dose of super growth serum, Mando had grown 1.5 times its original height. Our hero prepared a larger pot for it, lining it with first-class soil and topping it with premium organic nutrients. However, as Mando settled into its new home, it quickly appeared unwell. Ojin examined it thoroughly, confused by the lack of response. Selena watched silently, then suddenly plucked one of Mando's leaves. The action made our protagonist whip around in astonishment. A silent scream erupted from Mando, reverberating through the clinic. He flinched, covering his ears, while Selena stood frozen, equally surprised. After a tense silence, Mando gave a weak response. Our guy concluded that being repeatedly uprooted had weakened Mando's voice and reassured it that its voice would return naturally over time. The next day, Mando looked even worse. Leaves drooping, surface pale, and signs of rapid aging spread. Ojin's concern grew. He feared Mando might wither away completely. Selena wondered if the fertilizer was insufficient and suggested adding more. But before she could act, Pio stepped in, warning against their ignorance. She insisted that changing all the soil had left Mando unable to adapt. The soil Mando was used to was like its lifeline. Replacing it all at once had left it too weak to adapt. If they had delayed treatment, Mando would not have survived. Pio took charge, ordering immediate corrective steps. All leaves were to be removed to retain moisture, and Mando was placed in a ventilated area, out of the sun to inhibit photosynthesis. The next morning, Ojin quietly encouraged Mando, urging it to hold on for the next few days, promising a recovery. That night under the moonlight, Mando stood silent and still, crying softly from its stem. Ping waddled over cheerfully, unaware of the tension, and demanded a playful kick. Before it could act, our protagonist snatched it mid-air. He suddenly realized Ping had been stealing the missing herbs. Ojin scolded it for its greed and carelessness, pointing out its excessive weight gain. Then, Ping retaliated by biting his finger. At that moment, Sansa appeared and struck Ping on the head. The 4 marks on Ping's body erupted, glowing intensely. Our guy panicked, recognizing the dangerous energy flow and pleading for the reaction to stop. His necklace suddenly shone brightly, enveloping Ping in a barrier that contained the mark's power. Its division core was absorbed into the necklace. Ojin staggered back as energy dispersed across the room. A pulse of it hit Mando's pot. Mando revived instantly, its color returning, its form becoming vibrant, and it began to sway as if dancing. Our protagonist stared in disbelief. Selena explained that the energy from Ping Ping's division core had triggered rapid cell division in Mando, causing extraordinary regeneration and rapid growth. Pio celebrated Mando's recovery, relief evident on her face. Ojin chuckled as the tension dissipated. Selena picked up the exhausted Ping Ping, assuring it that its core was safe and would recover over time. Our guy warned against feeding Ping Ping Mando's leaves anymore, while Selena acknowledged the wonder of the division core that had saved them all. She silently credited her master for its creation. In the Western Forest, there was a ghost story, known as the Legend of the Legless Beauty. It was said that she appeared as a beautiful woman, with long hair, but in reality, she was a man-eating monster, with sharp teeth and no legs, crawling on her 2 front limbs. She appeared whenever she heard the cry of a child. Some said she was the vengeful spirit of a monster, who had gone mad after losing her child. Pio told the story with conviction, insisting it was true. But Ojin dismissed it as absurd and baseless. But Pio held her ground, while our hero questioned the lack of witnesses. Selena then revealed she had encountered signs of the creature in the forest a week ago, tracks of something that crawled on its 2 front limbs pressed into the ground. The eerie presence had scared everyone away, allowing her to pick herbs in peace. But Ojin grew uneasy, and suddenly there was a scratch at the door. Both Pio and our protagonist jumped, while Selena remarked that it sounded like someone was outside. Despite their warnings not to open it, she threw the door open to reveal Max. Our guy startled and noticed Max was holding a piece of Soy's clothing in his mouth, suspecting something had happened to Soy, and followed Max to find out. When he reached Soy, he found him safe and sound. Soy greeted him and asked what brought him here. Jin, relieved, thanked him. Soy recognized the piece of cloth as part of Max's comfort toy, realizing the dog must have been bored since he'd been so busy lately. While in the forest, our protagonist noticed Soy was working late. Soy pointed to a net hanging from a tree. A kitten was trapped inside. He explained that poachers had been active in the western forest, setting nets everywhere, and young animals kept getting trapped. One kitten hung too high, making it impossible for him to reach, so he went to get a pole. While waiting, Ojin noticed marks on the tree, deep scratches as if something had clawed at it. Soy also observed strange footprints around the tree, like those of a creature that only crawled on its 2 front limbs. They both grew uneasy, remembering the ghost story. Suddenly they heard a cry. Our hero asked Soy to stop making that noise, admitting he hated things like this. Soy denied it, but the crying grew closer. Then a figure appeared and they both froze, fearing the legless monster had arrived. Instead, it was a fox. Ojin noticed its 2 hind legs were injured, which explained the dragging footprints. The trapped kitten continued to cry for help from above, and the fox barked at it, scratching at the tree trunk. Our protagonist realized the fox was reacting to the cries and suspected it was going to eat the kitten. The cries continued and the net began to shake. Suddenly, the net fell. Ojin rushed forward just in time to catch it, breathing a sigh of relief. He looked inside and saw that it wasn't a kitten, but a fox cub, and it was dead. A sound from behind made our protagonist turn around. The large fox stood there ready to attack. Ojin realized he had let his guard down. Suddenly, Selena appeared and shot the fox with a tranquilizer dart. The animal collapsed unconscious. Selena checked to see if our hero was hurt and found him safe. She had arrived just moments before, drawn by curiosity about the rumored creature, which now revealed itself to be a heavenly tiger. Now Ojin carefully examined the fox, confirming its identity, and noting the numerous wounds on its body, including a gunshot wound on its hind leg. Selena examined it as well, noting that it must have recently given birth. Its mammary glands were swollen, and there were faint traces of suckling, indicating it hadn't nursed in a while. Our hero realized that the dead fox cub in the net must have been its child. The fox cub had been killed by hunters. They had cursed their bad luck, disappointed that it wasn't fully grown. However, they decided the white fur would fetch a good price. Before they could take it, the mother fox's angry cry echoed through the forest as she charged, forcing the hunters to flee. In the silence that followed, she approached her child's body, only to find a small cat appearing beside it. Meowing, hissing, she embraced her injured child and lay down in the rain. As the weak cub nursed, the mother fox opened her eyes again that night. But while she slept, that cat had appeared nearby again. The fox cub crawled towards it, and the two began to play. Until the next moment, they were both caught in a net. The mother fox woke to the sound, finding her child trapped on a high branch and crying helpless at the base of the tree. Now in the present, the mother fox was thrashing violently on the clinic floor. Our hero struggled to hold it down, but it sank its teeth into his arm. Reacting quickly, he injected a sedative into its neck. Its body tensed, then slowly relaxed, as he kept it from tearing its stitches. The next morning, a low growl echoed through the waiting room, drawing attention. Sansa crept closer, trying to peek into the treatment room, where the sound was coming from. It had been 3 days since the fox was admitted, but it still went berserk every time it woke up. Its body had started to build a tolerance to the sedative. Pio quietly wondered if the fox didn't realize its cub was dead. But our protagonist disagreed. The cub's body had been still for days. If the mother had been nearby, she would have known. Our guy noticed the stitches had torn open again. The wound refused to heal, as if its body was reflecting the torment in its mind. Trauma Ojin mused existed in animals too. Trapped in painful memories and rage, they lashed out at themselves and the world around them, much like the monsters in Western ghost stories. The kitten rescued with the fox had recovered after an IV drip. Still weak, it needed careful observation. Our hero reminded Pio to keep its temperature stable and make sure it stayed far from the fox's cage. Pio agreed and went to replace the kitten's cold water bottle with a warm one. The kitten whimpered, glancing toward the mother fox's cage. When Pio returned with a heating pad, she froze. The cage door was wide open. The kitten was gone. She panicked when she found it in the fox's enclosure, snuggled up against the mother. Pio immediately alerted our protagonist, fearing the worst. In the fox's unstable state, any movement could be fatal. But when they rushed in, they found the kitten nestled against the fox, quietly nursing. The fox stirred, its eyes fluttering open, and a single tear rolled down its cheek. Instead of attacking, it lowered its head and gently licked the small creature. The whole room stood still, stunned by the sight of a wounded predator, finding peace in the warmth of another life. The next day, the kitten zipped across the clinic floor, Pio's glove clamped in its mouth. Pio half-heartedly reached for it before giving up. As the kitten ran straight for the fox's cage, she decided she'd get it back later. But what was more important was the fox itself. Its recovery, once stalled, had become incredible. The wounds that had refused to close were now healing cleanly, and its sleep was no longer troubled by nightmares. Pio marveled at the progress, unable to believe the creature once thought to be crippled could now move its leg. The surviving nerves had begun to regenerate. Our hero watched silently, reflecting that he couldn't restore everything that humans had taken, but he could at least give back a piece of what was lost. When the fox and the kitten were finally released, they walked into the forest together. He silently bid them farewell, hoping never to see them again under such painful circumstances. The fox glanced back once, an acknowledgement before disappearing into the trees. Over time, the rumors of the monster in the western forest faded too. A gentler story replaced them, one of a wandering white fox, with a small cat always at its side. Meanwhile, at the clinic, the mandrake stood proudly in its pot, drawing curious glances. Visitors whispered about the strange radish-like plant that moved on its own, speculating if it was the hospital's guardian spirit. Some insisted it was the mandrake, while others argued the true guardian was a terrifying cat, rumored to be able to silence even the wildest of beasts. Annoyed by the whispers, the mandrake stomped over to Sansa's food bowl and knocked it over in defiance. The crowd gasped. How dare it challenge the cat's authority? Their shock grew as Sansa herself appeared, eyes flashing. The mandrake froze in fear as she approached. It leaped forward, but instead of attacking, coughed up a hairball right on top of the mandrake. Confusion spread through the crowd until our protagonist calmly explained that cats often swallow loose fur while grooming, which then clumps together and is expelled by vomiting. Realizing how little he had been grooming her lately, he decided it was time for a proper grooming session. An hour later, Sansa's fur seemed to be never-ending. The piles of shed fur grew taller, and our hero began to worry. The cat might go bald at this rate. Then a small patch of bare skin caught his eye. Examining it closely, he realized with a little disappointment that it might be fungal dermatitis. But the thought stung him. How could a veterinarian overlook his own cat's condition? He brought out a carefully crafted tool, made by the best craftsman in town, the world's first handmade pet clippers. Although not necessary for the treatment, he felt compelled to use it. As he started to shave, Sansa hissed and launched off the table. The moment called for restraint, but his veterinarian instincts wouldn't let him back down. A veterinarian must never back down in a battle of wills with an animal. Regaining his resolve, he held his ground, murmuring soft words of reassurance. As he continued, Sansa writhed and cried out, but he gently persisted, determined to finish quickly for her sake. Then, without warning, her neck began to glow. The light spread, filling the clinic, with a brilliant aura, visible even from outside. Startled, our protagonist stepped back, as a magic circle formed beneath her. From within the circle, Kallian emerged not as a projection, but in the flesh. Later, over tea, our guy recounted everything. Kallian listened intently, then explained that Sansa's condition wasn't a disease at all, but a natural shedding phase. monoceroses, undergo cycles of rapid growth, during which they shed their fur completely to renew their life force. They must purify themselves in a Siebel lake. If they fail to do so, the fur may fall out, but it will never grow back. Our hero realized with quiet horror that the clinic's beloved mascot, the cat adored by every visitor, was suffering from severe hair loss. Kalian calmly observed the situation, explaining that while it posed no major health risk, it would take time for the fur to regrow. That reassurance did little to deter Ojin's resolve. He was determined to find Siebel Lake at once, believing it would help his companion recover. Kalian clarified that the lake wasn't a single fixed location, but a type of lake rich in mana and spiritual energy, inhabited by Siebel seals that fed on it. There was one in the Belmo region, though it was in a protected area controlled by the Ezerin, guild dangerous for ordinary travelers. Undeterred, our protagonist insisted they would leave at dawn. Selena spoke up expressing her concern, warning that the journey was dangerous, but Kalian agreed to be their guide. He asked about the clinic, but Ojin assured him the patients would be fine. Adrian would oversee things in his absence. By nightfall, they reached the western forest. The land felt like a living legend, dense, silent, and haunted by countless ghost stories. Strange lights flickered among the trees, and even the air hummed with magic. But few dared to walk here. Soon, they spotted a creeping red flower, and Kalian noted the lake must be close. Ojin squatted by a strange flower, commenting on its unusual shape, but Selena warned him not to touch it. Siebel seals released a toxin when disturbed, and countless other dangers lurked among the roots. Suddenly, Sansa trotted up proudly, snake dangling from her jaws. Our guy leaned down to pet her, praising her while Selena carefully removed the snake. The snake's body bore a distorted human face, a rare and highly venomous human-faced snake. Ojin shuddered at the sight, and quickly placed Sansa in a cage to prevent her from causing more trouble. Kalian chuckled, remarking that the cat looked thoroughly offended by the restraint. When they reached the lake, the water glowed with the gentle light. Mana swirled beneath it like liquid starlight. Even our protagonist, who was used to the extraordinary, was momentarily speechless, captivated by its beauty. He decided to enter the water alone. Kalian objected, warning it was too dangerous, but Ojin insisted. Cats become extremely wary when they're exposed, and the presence of others would only cause more stress. She barely tolerated grooming. A bath would be even worse. Kalian relented, invoking the blessing of the water spirits. His chant summoned the protection of Celestine, enveloping Ojin in a charm and granting him gills that shimmered faintly in the magical light. Now safe from the dangers, our hero took a deep breath, steeling himself. Joking to himself, he admitted that he'd rather pass out than face what was about to happen. Still, he took Sansa in his arms, gently coaxing her with treats as they descended into the glowing pond. The cat's paws skimmed the surface, and instead of panicking, a calm settled over her features. The sight amazed him. A thought formed. Perhaps this was the legendary water attribute cat, the kind said to appear only to those whose families had done good for 3 generations. Sansa drifted gracefully through the water, her fur shimmering like liquid silver. The sight melted our hero's composure, making him long for the comforts of his old world, a camera barbecue, cold beer, or coffee, anything to capture this moment. The lake sparkled around them, with mana bubbles popping like carbonated light. As our protagonist groomed her, the fur began to peel away in hazy patches, as if she were not just shedding, but molting. Ojin marveled at the transformation, until the bar of soap slipped from his hand, drifting toward a patch of strange flowers. Reaching for it instinctively, our guy realized too late that he had touched the poisonous sebelsea plant. A sharp sting flashed through his hand, and the world blurred. The water faded to black. But when Ojin opened his eyes, he was no longer in the lake but in a strange place. Our protagonist looked around, in confusion, whispering to himself in disbelief. Then a giant paw landed on his shoulder. Turning slowly, he saw a lion standing behind him, its golden eyes calm and unblinking. He froze, a question forming on his lips. Who was this creature standing before him?